we gather around a quiet question that lives in every heart. Why was I born? What is the meaning of life? Many of us chase answers in careers, in romance, in achievement, yet an ache of emptiness returns. A Zen saying points gently home. The most meaningful thing in a human life is returning to the true home, seeing our true self. But what does it mean to return to ourselves? Does it ask us to abandon the world, or to see the world more clearly, just as it is? Tonight, we walk a path that says the meaning of life is not hidden in the future. It is available in the life that is here, now, breathing with you. Welcome, Moonlight Temple. In this video, you'll hear simple, timeless stories from the Buddhist and Zen tradition, clear teachings translated into everyday language, and down-to-earth applications you can use at work, at home, and in all your relationships. By the end, you'll understand how daily frictions, praise and blame, gain and loss, can become mirrors that show you who you truly are, and how returning is less a task and more a gentle recognition. As you listen, notice where your chest softens, where your mind resists, where a small light of knowing appears. Which part of your day longs to be met with kindness? Which habit is asking to be released? Let these questions carry you forward, and when you're ready, we'll step into the first story together. If this journey brings you calm and clarity, please support the channel, subscribe, like, and share, so more hearts can rest here with Moonlight Temple. Chapter 1. The Seeker of Perfection. There once lived a man who spent his whole life chasing the idea of perfection. From the time he was young, he believed that true peace could only be found when he became something greater, a sage, a saint, a Buddha. So he began a journey that consumed every breath of his existence. He left his home, renounced his family, and wandered from master to master. He fasted until his body trembled. He knelt until his knees bled. He disciplined his mind with such intensity that even the wind seemed to hesitate before touching him. And yet, the more he tried to become, the farther peace seemed to slip away. He built his days around striving, always trying to reach, to purify, to ascend. When he sat in meditation, his heart whispered, "Not yet, not enough." When he saw others resting in contentment, he felt a quiet envy. They don't know how much more there is to achieve. Years passed. His youth turned to middle age, then to weariness. His practices grew heavier, his expectations sharper. One day, sitting beneath a fading tree, he felt utterly exhausted, not only in body but in spirit. Every technique, every vow, every path he had followed had led him to the same silent emptiness. He had nothing left to cling to, and so, without meaning to, he gave up. He stopped striving. He stopped wanting to be anyone else. He simply sat, breathing. The wind touched his face, and for the first time, he felt it. A bird called in the distance, and he heard it, not as a sound to analyze, but as life itself. His mind grew quiet, wide as the sky. A single tear rolled down his cheek, not from sadness, but from the relief of finally arriving where he had never left. In that stillness, a profound clarity bloomed. Everything was complete. Nothing was missing. The Buddha, who had watched silently from afar, smiled gently. He said, "An arahant is not one who has created perfection, but one who has let go of every intention to create." The man bowed deeply, his heart trembling with gratitude. He finally understood. Enlightenment was not something to build, but something to uncover, a home that had always been within him. This story, though ancient, feels deeply familiar. We all live some version of it. We work tirelessly to become better, kinder, wiser, more successful, more spiritual. We polish our outer life hoping to reach some invisible standard of worth. Yet the harder we try to grasp meaning, the more it fades into mist. Like the man in the story, we chase after an image of ourselves, the person we think we should be, and forget the quiet, radiant self that simply is. The teaching is not a rejection of effort or discipline, but a gentle invitation to see the difference between effort born of love and effort born of fear. One arises naturally, like breathing. The other tightens the chest and clouds the heart. The Buddha's smile reminds us, perfection was never the goal, presence is. In that recognition, the story becomes more than a tale of one seeker. It becomes the story of humanity. Each of us is walking the same spiral path, running in circles through ambition and doubt, until the circle itself becomes a mirror. And when we finally stop, when the chase collapses into stillness, the mirror reveals what was always there, our own luminous nature, clear and untouchable. The man's journey did not end in failure. His exhaustion was not defeat, it was grace in disguise. The collapse of striving opened the door to peace. When all becoming ceased, being appeared. He had searched for the sacred in 1,000 directions, only to discover that the sacred had been searching for him all along. Perhaps that is why, in Zen, there is a saying, the way is not about adding something new, it is about removing what hides the truth. When we stop measuring, stop chasing, stop trying to be holy, we begin to notice the holiness already woven through the smallest details. The breath entering and leaving, the sound of rain, the space between thoughts. The seeker's transformation teaches a truth that feels almost too simple to believe. Enlightenment is not a distant mountain to climb, but the very ground beneath your feet. You do not need to struggle toward the light. You only need to notice that you have never been outside it. So if you find yourself weary from self-improvement, from endless comparison, or the ache of not being enough, remember this man beneath the tree. Remember how peace found him only after he stopped looking for it. You do not have to earn your own wholeness. You are already sitting inside it. Let this story settle in you like quiet rain. Feel the stillness behind its words. There, beneath all striving, beneath all dreams of becoming, something eternal is waiting. The gentle, uncreated light of your own true self. When you are ready, take a slow breath, and we will continue to the next part, to explore what it truly means to return home, not through effort, but through seeing. The Buddha's words, an arahant is not one who creates perfection, but one who lets go of the desire to create, reveals something subtle and profound. In our ordinary way of seeing, we believe meaning comes from achievement. We assume awakening must be the final result of long, heroic effort, a prize earned through endurance and moral purity. Yet this assumption hides a quiet illusion, the belief that enlightenment is somewhere else, waiting at the end of striving. The teaching of returning to the true home points in the opposite direction. It says, stop moving and see what is already here. To return is not to retreat from life, nor to abandon the world, but to stop chasing after a better version of yourself. The enlightened state is not a new condition to construct. It is the natural clarity that appears when all the constructions fall away. The Buddha called this seeing the pathless path. When you follow it, there is nowhere to be, arrive, because arrival has already happened. Each moment, a breath, a sound, a thought, a simple act of washing your hands, is the field of awakening. The ordinary and the sacred are not two. They are the same river, glimpsed through different eyes. When we stop dividing experience into holy and worldly, we begin to see that the light of wisdom shines quietly in both. Returning to the true home is not a mystical experience reserved for saints. It is the recognition that everything you have been seeking is contained within this present awareness. The Buddha used a simple image, a person searching for water while standing in the middle of a lake. We move restlessly through life, striving, hoping, fearing, all the while surrounded by what we seek. The more we struggle to become awake, the deeper we sink into the dream of becoming. To see through that dream is the first step of freedom. The moment you realize there is nowhere to go, you have already arrived. This is why the teaching says that each person already carries the seed of awakening. Nothing needs to be imported from outside. When the soil of the heart is quiet, the seed opens by itself. No force is required. The light of the moon does not strain to shine. It simply reveals itself when the clouds drift away. So too, our true nature reveals itself when craving and resistance lose their grip. Buddhism often speaks of the mirror mind. The mirror does not judge the image it reflects. It does not hold on to what it likes or reject what it dislikes. It simply shines. In that same way, the awakened heart mirrors life exactly as it is, joy and sorrow, birth and death, without distortion. To live with such clarity is to be free, even in the middle of the world. But for most of us, the habit of seeking runs deep. We think, if I meditate more, if I read enough books, if I fix all my flaws, then I will be at peace. We turn spirituality itself into another project of self-improvement. We polish the mirror endlessly, forgetting that it was never dirty to begin with. The mind that tries to perfect enlightenment is like a wave trying to reach the ocean. It is already made of the ocean, but it doesn't see it yet. Seeing one's true self does not mean discovering a permanent soul or identity. It means seeing the empty, luminous nature of all phenomena, including the self. It is recognizing that everything arises and passes within awareness, without a separate controller behind it. When you look deeply, you find no me who thinks, no me who feels, no me who suffers, only thoughts, feelings, and sensations dancing in the great space of being. This seeing is not cold or detached. It is tender and compassionate. It dissolves the wall between self and world, so love can flow freely. Imagine standing before a clear lake. When the surface is still, it reflects the sky perfectly. But when you stir it with desire, the reflection breaks into ripples. The sky is still there, only your restlessness obscures it. The Buddha's teaching is an invitation to let the lake of your mind grow still again. Then the reflection returns on its own. Every human being, no matter their background or belief, knows what it feels like to lose connection with themselves. We get caught in comparison, judgment, ambition, fear. We mistake these waves for who we are. But behind every wave, there is the same vast water, quiet, boundless, unbroken. The spiritual journey is not about taming the waves, it is about remembering the water. This returning does not happen through control, it happens through surrender. Control belongs to the ego, surrender belongs to truth. When you no longer try to hold your experience in place, when you allow sadness to be sadness, joy to be joy, something miraculous unfolds. Awareness becomes gentle, open, and vast. In that space, all things find their right place. The Buddha described enlightenment as the end of fabrications. In other words, it is the end of pretending, the end of trying to arrange life into what you think it should be. The awakened mind doesn't reject anything, it simply sees everything clearly. Even pain is allowed to exist without resistance, and therefore it no longer imprisons us. To return to the true home is to stop being at war with yourself. It is to see that nothing needs to be added or removed. You are not a problem to fix. You are a mystery to behold. The mind's restlessness comes from believing that peace lies elsewhere, in the next moment, the next achievement, the next version of you. But peace is what allows those moments to exist at all. When you realize this, even the most ordinary day becomes sacred. Washing dishes, walking to your car, listening to rain, all of it reveals the luminous heart of reality. The idea of practice shifts from effort to intimacy. You no longer meditate to get somewhere. You meditate because being alive, in its raw and fleeting form, is already enough. There is a quiet joy in this understanding, not the ecstatic joy of triumph, but the simple joy of belonging. You start to sense that life has never been against you. Every struggle, every disappointment was pointing you back toward home. Even the pain you once resented becomes a teacher. It shows you where you were clinging, where you refused to trust the flow. When the Buddha said, "In seeing one thing clearly, you see all things," he meant that once you recognize your own nature as open and unbounded, you recognize it in everything else. The bird, the wind, the stranger's face, even the silence between words, all are made of the same awareness. There is no boundary between the observer and the observed. This understanding does not remove us from the world, it deepens our connection to it. You still feel hunger and tenderness, you still care and grieve, but now compassion moves naturally through you. You realize that everything you meet is another expression of the same life that breathes you. The separation dissolves, and in its place arises quiet gratitude for being here at all. So when the Buddha smiled at the weary seeker beneath the tree, he was smiling at each of us. He was reminding us that the search can end, not in despair, but in recognition. You don't need to become light. You already are light. You don't need to climb to heaven. Heaven is the stillness behind this breath. To live this truth is to walk gently in the world. It is to meet each moment with eyes that see and a heart that does not grasp. It is to trust that the meaning of life is not something you must build, but something you awaken to right here in the immediacy of being. And now, as this teaching settles into the quiet of your mind, take a slow, deep breath. Feel the air moving in and out, effortless, natural, already complete. This, too, is a return. When you are ready, we will move to the next reflection, how this wisdom unfolds in daily life, and how even the smallest actions can become gateways to awakening. When we hear the story of the man who spent his life searching for enlightenment and finally found peace by letting go, it can sound distant, even mythical. Yet, this story is not about a monk under a tree long ago. It is about us, about the countless ways we keep chasing our own idea of enough. The same movement that drove him, the longing to be complete, moves silently in each of us. We reach for it through success, through love, through spiritual growth, through the wish to be seen as wise or good. But each of those pursuits, if we cling to them too tightly, becomes another disguise for fear. Fear of being ordinary, fear of being no one. The Buddha's teaching brings this search into the light. He did not tell us to stop living or to renounce joy. He simply asked us to see the grasping clearly, to see how we tie our own knots. When you let go of the idea of becoming, he said, you begin to be. That small shift, from becoming to being, changes everything. It turns life from a competition into a conversation. It turns spirituality from an achievement into an intimacy with what is. To live this way doesn't mean abandoning ambition or growth. It means doing what needs to be done, but without the voice that whispers, "When this is finished, I'll finally be whole." You can still build, create, love, and learn, but you do it with an open hand, not a clenched fist. The power of the teaching lies in its simplicity. When we stop trying to be perfect, we start to experience what is already perfect. In daily life, this insight can feel almost invisible, like a faint breeze on the skin. It appears in small pauses, the moment before you speak, the breath before you react, the silence after a sigh. You notice how much of your energy goes into controlling things, shaping people, managing outcomes. You begin to realize that most of the suffering in your day doesn't come from what happens, but from your resistance to what happens. When you drop that resistance, even briefly, something extraordinary begins to unfold. The world softens, people seem less threatening, time itself feels slower, more alive. It's as if reality has been waiting patiently for you to stop fighting it, to join it in its natural rhythm. This is the essence of returning home, not a mystical escape from the world, but a reconciliation with it. Imagine walking through your day with a heart that no longer argues with life. The traffic jam is still there, the unfinished work is still there, the grief and confusion are still there. But something in you has shifted. You are not trapped inside them. You are aware of them. That small gap, awareness itself, becomes your refuge. It is spacious, compassionate, untouched by the noise. The Buddha called this awareness the unshakable freedom of heart. It doesn't depend on success or failure. It doesn't depend on being right or wrong. It is the quiet recognition that nothing you add to yourself will make you more real than you already are. When you rest in that recognition, every ordinary act becomes sacred. Washing dishes, talking with a friend, sitting in the dark, each becomes a moment of presence. In this way, spiritual practice moves out of temples and monasteries and into the fabric of life itself. You begin to practice in the supermarket, in the kitchen, in traffic. You practice by listening deeply to someone's pain without needing to fix it. You practice by forgiving yourself for being human. You practice by breathing through moments of tension instead of collapsing into them. The more you practice, the more you realize that the path is not a path at all. It is life unfolding exactly as it should. The Zen masters often say, when walking, just walk. When sitting, just sit. These are not instructions for minimalism. They are reminders to live without distraction, to give your full attention to what is here. In this giving, you find peace. When you eat, you taste each bite. When you listen, you truly hear. When you rest without guilt. Life becomes less about improvement and more about intimacy. You begin to experience what the ancient texts call suchness, the simplicity of things as they are. Even in moments of sorrow, suchness is present. You may feel grief, loss, confusion, but underneath, there is still awareness holding it all. Like the ocean, holding its waves, awareness doesn't reject or cling. It allows everything to rise and fade naturally. You can cry and still feel peace. You can fail and still feel whole. You can let go and still feel love. This way of being doesn't require retreating from the world. It asks only that you show up fully, with honesty and compassion. When you make mistakes, you bow to them as teachers. When someone hurts you, you recognize that pain as part of the shared human condition. You stop seeing enemies and start seeing mirrors. Every encounter becomes an opportunity to see more clearly where you still grasp, where you still resist, and where you can open more deeply. Slowly, a gentle humility grows. You see that enlightenment isn't a grand awakening that removes you from human life. It's the quiet realization that you are human life, fragile, changing, interconnected. The desire to become someone spiritual fades. You no longer need to perform peace. You embody it in simple gestures, a soft voice, a patient breath, a kind glance. When you live like this, the boundaries between meditation and living begin to dissolve. Sitting in stillness and walking in the marketplace feel like extensions of the same awareness. You carry the temple within you. The monk in the story had to spend decades searching to realize this truth. You can recognize it now, in the middle of your ordinary day. You can pause and breathe, feeling the quiet pulse of existence moving through you. If you pay close attention, you might notice that even your longing for peace has softened. What remains is not a goal, but a presence, a steady awareness that holds your entire life with tenderness. This is what it means to live awake, not a life without problems, but a life without resistance. Returning to your true home is not an escape from the world's chaos. It's the rediscovery of stillness within it. It's learning to trust that the ground of your being is already whole, already luminous, already free. When this trust deepens, gratitude naturally arises. You start to see that every breath is a gift, every encounter a reminder of interconnection. You no longer chase meaning, you live it. Take a moment now. Feel the breath as it enters and leaves. Feel the body resting against the chair or bed. Notice that you don't have to do anything for this moment to be complete. There is nothing missing. The air moves, the heart beats, the mind softens. Life is here, and it is enough. When we begin to live from this place, we realize that perfection was never something to be achieved. It was always the quiet background of our being. The man in the story discovered this truth after years of exhaustion, but we don't need to wait that long. We can stop running today. The true teaching of the Buddha is not about chasing enlightenment. It is about remembering the luminous simplicity that has never left you. Every time you pause, breathe, and smile without reason, you are already returning. Every time you forgive yourself for being human, you are already home. And so, as you end this chapter, let these words echo softly inside you. Nothing needs to be fixed, only seen. Nothing needs to be achieved, only allowed. Life, in all its imperfection, is already perfect. When you are ready, we will move together to the next chapter to see how the friction and contact of daily life, the moments that seem to disturb our peace, can in fact become the very doorways that guide us back to it. You are listening to a gentle teaching from the Moonlight Temple series, wisdom drawn from ancient Buddhist roots, brought to life with care and presence. To fully receive the heart of these teachings, I invite you now to pause, soften the edges of your day, let your body rest, take in a slow, quiet breath, and exhale into stillness. Allow your awareness to return, not to the past, not to the future, but to this very moment. Nothing else is required. Just your presence. If this offering has brought you a moment of peace, we gently invite you to support this journey by subscribing to the Moonlight Temple, sharing these teachings, or simply returning again when your heart needs rest. Every small act of presence helps this temple of silence grow. Chapter 2. The Collisions of Life, the Doorway to Seeing Ourselves. A young student once approached his teacher, frustration heavy in his voice. "Master," he said, "why is my life filled with so many obstacles? Every time I think I have found peace. Something comes along to shake it apart. Why must there be so many challenges, so many wounds? The old teacher smiled gently. He raised his sleeve and pointed to a faint scar on his forearm. Do you see this? He asked softly. When I was young, I thought I could walk through life without ever being hurt. I thought peace meant avoiding pain. But I was wrong. This scar is from a time when I fell hard. It hurt. It bled. And yet, that was the moment I realized where I truly stood. The fall showed me the ground beneath my feet. The collisions of life, my child, are what show us where we are. The student was silent. The room grew still, except for the whisper of the wind outside. The teacher's eyes were kind but unwavering. If you walk through life without ever touching anything, you'll never know your own edges. You'll never learn how deep your roots go. It's the impact, the meeting, the friction that reveals who we are beneath the stories we tell about ourselves. For a long time, the student sat with those words. They did not bring immediate comfort. Instead, they worked slowly, like seeds pressing their way through soil. He began to notice how often he moved through life trying to avoid discomfort, how he withdrew from criticism, hurried past grief, and built walls against loss. But every wall also kept out understanding. Every escape postponed the truth. Over time, he began to see that his teacher's scar was not just a mark of pain, but a mark of awareness, the kind that only arises when one stops running. He saw that each collision in his own life, though painful, had shaped him into someone more real, more honest, more human. When love ended, he discovered tenderness. When dreams failed, he discovered humility. When he lost his sense of control, he found a deeper kind of trust. This story speaks to a truth that every human heart knows. We all want peace, but most of us imagine peace as the absence of trouble. We long for smooth days and easy roads. Yet real peace doesn't come from avoiding storms. It comes from learning to stand in the rain without fear. The Buddha never promised a life without difficulty. He promised understanding, that through difficulty, we could awaken. In Zen, this is sometimes called the wisdom of friction. A pearl is born only because the oyster endures the grain of sand. The beauty of the pearl is not, despite the irritation, it is because of it. So too, the polish of a human heart comes from being touched by life, from being wounded and healed, again and again. The pain we fear is the same pain that reveals our depth. Think for a moment of your own scars, the visible ones, and the ones no one can see. Each one tells a story, not of defeat, but of discovery. Each moment that bruised you also opened you. You learned patience from waiting, compassion from heartbreak, courage from failure. These are not accidents. They are the very ground of awakening. The student in the story did not suddenly become wise. He continued to face loss, anger, and confusion. But now, instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" he began to ask, "What is this teaching me?" That shift in question is the beginning of transformation. When life pressed against him, he learned to stop pushing back and start listening. He learned to let the friction polish his heart instead of hardening it. Each of us meets countless collisions, disagreements, disappointments, illnesses, endings, moments when life refuses to fit our plans. It's natural to feel hurt or defensive, to wish things were easier. But if we can pause, even briefly, something extraordinary begins to happen. The pain starts to reveal what is true. Our impatience shows us where we still cling. Our anger shows us where we feel unseen. Our sadness shows us what we've loved deeply. The teacher's scar reminds us that to live is to be touched by joy and by suffering, by praise and by blame. Trying to live untouched is like trying to walk without leaving footprints. The contact itself is what makes life real. Every person you meet, every challenge you face, is another mirror reflecting something within you. Life doesn't come to harm you, it comes to show you yourself. Perhaps this is what the Buddha meant when he said, "When you are struck by the arrow of pain, do not shoot yourself with the second arrow of resistance. The first arrow is unavoidable, it's the sting of life. The second arrow is our reaction, our judgment, our attempt to escape what's already here. But if we can stop after the first arrow, if we can simply feel the pain without running from it, the pain itself becomes medicine. It teaches us to see. The teacher's wisdom echoes this same truth. Without contact, without friction, we remain asleep. The collisions of life wake us up. They are the knocks at the door of consciousness, asking us to open. And when we finally do, when we allow ourselves to feel, to face, to stay, we discover that even in pain, there is a strange and quiet grace. So the next time life bumps against you, when someone criticizes you, when plans fall apart, when uncertainty grips your heart, pause. Feel the scar beginning to form, not as a wound to hide, but as a mark of your awakening. This is life's way of whispering. Look deeper. There you are. In time, like the student, you may find yourself grateful for the collisions you once feared. You may find that the people who challenged you the most were your greatest teachers. You may look at your scars and see not damage, but depth, not pain, but presence. The Buddha's path is not a path of escape, but of meeting life exactly as it is. The more deeply we meet it, the more clearly we see ourselves. That is how awakening happens, not by avoiding life, but by letting life touch us completely. And so, when we ask, why are there so many challenges? The teacher's gentle answer still echoes through time, because only through touching life can we truly know it. Only through being touched can we know ourselves. Take a moment now to breathe with this. Feel the places in your life that are tender, uncertain, imperfect. They are not signs of failure. They are the living doorway through which you can step into awareness. When you are ready, we will move to the next part of this chapter, the teaching behind these collisions, and how each moment of impact, whether gentle or fierce, can become a mirror for awakening. When the Buddha spoke of suffering, he did not mean to condemn life or portray it as punishment. He was describing something intimate, the way human beings meet experience. We all live in a web of conditions, health and illness, gain and loss, praise and blame, birth and death. Each moment touches us, and the mind reacts, clinging to what it likes, pushing away what it doesn't. These movements, so small and so constant, create the tension we call suffering. To understand this is to see that every encounter in life, every joy, every conflict, every disappointment is not a mistake. It is part of a great unfolding designed to show us ourselves. When the Buddha said, "When the wise person encounters the world, they meet it as a mirror," he was inviting us to look not at what happens, but at how we respond. When someone praises us, we feel uplifted. When they criticize us, we feel crushed. The world remains the same, yet our peace rises and falls like a leaf in the wind. Why? Because we have built our identity around fragile reflections, the opinions of others, the stories we tell, the images we defend. Each collision with life reveals where we are still holding on. Each touch exposes the boundaries of our illusion. Imagine walking through a dark forest with a small lantern. You can see only a few steps ahead. Each obstacle, a fallen branch, a sharp stone, shows you where the ground truly lies. Without them, you would stumble in blindness. In the same way, life's challenges are not barriers. They are markers that reveal the terrain of the heart. Without friction, there would be no awareness. The Buddha taught that the root of suffering is attachment, the wish for life to be other than it is. When we resist pain, we suffer twice, first from the wound itself, and then from our refusal to feel it. The practice of awakening begins when we turn toward experience instead of away from it. This is the meaning of, when you touch life, see yourself. It is not a command to endure pain for its own sake, but an invitation to meet life with clarity, without denial or blame. When you look deeply into any moment of suffering, you find that it carries a message. Anger points to fear, fear points to attachment, attachment points to misunderstanding, and misunderstanding points back to ignorance, the forgetting of our true nature. The entire cycle of human struggle begins and ends with this forgetting. To remember who we are is to step out of it. This remembering is not an intellectual idea, it is a lived recognition. It arises when we stop asking the world to confirm our worth, when we see clearly that the criticism of another person does not define us. We begin to glimpse freedom. When we see that the praise of another does not inflate us, we begin to glimpse peace. The collisions that once felt like attacks become mirrors reflecting our inner weather, the passing clouds of emotion across the vast sky of awareness. The Buddha called this insight vipassana, or clear seeing. It is the ability to observe the play of experience, the heat of anger, the ache of loneliness, the rush of desire, without losing ourselves inside it. This doesn't mean we become indifferent. True clarity is not cold. It is a warm, compassionate seeing that understands. This, too, is part of being human. When we bring this seeing into daily life, everything changes. A harsh word no longer has the same power to wound. Failure no longer defines us. Even grief begins to open into tenderness. The events of life remain, but the self that clings to them begins to dissolve. What remains is spaciousness, a quiet, loving awareness that allows all things to come and go. In this light, we begin to understand that the world has always been our teacher. The people we dislike, the moments that frustrate us, the times when everything falls apart, they are not accidents. They are invitations. Each one says, "Look here, there is something to see." When we meet life with resistance, we stay on the surface. When we meet it with curiosity, we begin to awaken. There is an old Zen saying, "The obstacle is the path." It sounds simple, yet it contains the whole truth of the practice. The obstacle, the thing we wish to avoid, is not blocking our way, it is the way. The discomfort we feel when criticized is the mirror showing us our attachment to being right. The sadness we feel when rejected is the mirror showing us our longing for approval. The restlessness we feel when life slows down is the mirror showing us our addiction to control. Every mirror points us back to the same place, the mind that clings. But the teaching is not to shame that mind or to fight against it. The Buddha's compassion lies in understanding that even our clinging comes from love, a confused love, but love nonetheless. We cling because we want safety, belonging, happiness. We fear loss because we have tasted connection. We fear failure because we wish to contribute something meaningful. When we see this clearly, judgment melts away. Instead of condemning our reactions, we hold them with kindness. We learn to say, "Ah, this too is me. this frightened, grasping heart. Seeing in this way, suffering becomes softer. It doesn't disappear overnight, but it begins to lose its sting. The same events that once seemed unbearable become bearable, even beautiful in their rawness. Like the scar on the teacher's arm, they become reminders of how life teaches through touch. The world is not punishing us, it is polishing us. Over time, we start to realize that awakening is not a matter of escaping life's collisions, but of becoming intimate with them. We begin to trust the wisdom hidden inside pain. We understand that every emotion has its place, that nothing needs to be pushed away. This is why the Buddha spoke of equanimity, not cold detachment, but a deep stability that comes from seeing the whole. When we no longer divide life into good and bad, we stop fighting it. We stand quietly at the center, open to it all. It is in this openness that compassion naturally blooms. Once you have seen your own suffering clearly, you cannot help but recognize it in others. You begin to notice the tightness in a stranger's eyes, the tremble behind someone's anger, the quiet fatigue behind their smile. The collisions that once made you defensive now make you tender. Every person you meet becomes another chance to practice understanding. This is the true purpose of difficulty, not to break us, but to break us open. It teaches us humility. It teaches us patience. It shows us how to love without conditions. The Buddha called this the path of liberation through wisdom and compassion. Each challenge, when met with awareness, becomes a step on that path. So when life collides with you, when someone misunderstands you, when plans fall apart, when fear rises, remember, this is not happening to you, but for you. It is life inviting you to see what still binds you, to loosen your grip, to return home to what cannot be shaken. Look again at the teacher's scar. It is no longer a symbol of suffering. It is the sign of one who has met life fully and come through awake. That same possibility lives in you. Each mark, each wound, each collision is an unopened gate to freedom. Take a deep breath. Feel the quiet truth behind these words. You are being shaped not by what you avoid, but by what you are willing to face. Life's contact is not an enemy. It is a teacher wearing many masks. When you are ready, we will move to the next reflection. How to bring this wisdom into everyday life, turning moments of pain into moments of awakening. When we begin to understand that every collision in life is a mirror, we start to see daily experience in a new light. The small irritations that once felt meaningless, a harsh word from a colleague, a misunderstanding with someone we love, the disappointment of plans not working out, all become teachers. They reveal the fragile places inside us, the parts still asking to be seen with kindness. Life stops being a battlefield and becomes a classroom of the heart. In truth, every human being wants peace, but most of us look for it in a world that cannot remain still. We try to build safety out of praise, possessions, or control, but the moment something changes, the peace collapses. The Buddha's wisdom offers another way, to rest not in what changes, but in the awareness that sees change. That awareness is not shaken by the rise and fall of events. It is like the sky, holding storms and sunshine without preference. In daily life, this understanding begins with simple attention. When someone criticizes you, notice what happens in your body, the tightening in your chest, the heat behind your eyes, the thoughts rushing to defend yourself. All of these are signals. They show the mind's habit of protecting an image of me. Instead of reacting immediately, take one breath. Feel the energy of reaction. Don't call it wrong. Don't try to make it disappear. Just stay with it, gently, as if you were holding a frightened child. That single moment of presence is the practice. You are no longer lost in the storm. You are aware of it. In that awareness, you can ask quietly, "What is this moment teaching me?" Maybe it's showing you how much you still depend on approval. Maybe it's revealing an old wound that wants understanding, not judgment. The point is not to find fault, but to see clearly. Because the moment you see clearly, the pattern begins to soften on its own. The Buddha compared this kind of seeing to cleaning a window. The dust of reaction and ignorance has gathered for lifetimes. You don't need to fight it. Just wipe gently, moment by moment, with awareness. Over time, the glass becomes clear. You start to see the world, not through the filter of how it should be, but as it truly is. And that reality, when seen clearly, is peaceful. Sometimes the teaching is subtle. A friend forgets to call you back, and you feel a small sting of being unimportant. Instead of covering it up, you can pause and feel that sensation, the ache of wanting to matter. Beneath it, you may discover a tenderness, a longing shared by every heart. The more you see your own longing without shame, the more you understand others. Compassion grows naturally, not as a rule, but as recognition. At other times, the lessons arrive like storms. Illness, loss, betrayal, the kinds of collisions that change the landscape of your life. In those moments, the mind often cries out, "Why me?" But if you listen more deeply, another voice whispers, "Stay here. Don't run." These experiences strip away illusion. They show us that everything we thought we owned, youth, love, health, certainty, was never truly ours. This realization can feel like grief, but it is also freedom. The less we cling, the more space there is to breathe. The Buddha's path invites us to meet pain, not with resistance, but with wisdom. He did not say, "Do not feel pain." He said, "See the nature of pain." To see its nature means to notice how it arises, how it changes, and how it passes away. When you observe pain in this way, whether physical or emotional, you start to realize that even suffering obeys the law of impermanence. Nothing, not even sorrow, lasts forever. When you remember this, you begin to live with more trust. You don't have to rush to fix or control everything. You learn to let experience breathe. This is not passivity, it's intimacy with reality. You stop arguing with life, and in doing so, you discover a kind of power that control could never give you. The power of acceptance. To live this teaching in ordinary moments, you might begin each morning with a quiet intention. Today, I will meet what comes with awareness. You can repeat it like a soft mantra. Then, throughout the day, whenever something feels uncomfortable, remember that intention. When someone cuts you off in traffic, or when plans fall apart, pause for a breath. You don't have to like what's happening, but you can choose to stay awake in it. Each pause is a doorway back to yourself. Slowly, you'll start to notice a transformation. The things that used to trigger you begin to lose their power. You still feel emotions, sadness, anger, fear, but they pass through more gently, like waves that no longer knock you down. You become less reactive, more responsive. Instead of being driven by habit, you begin to act from understanding. This is what it means to bring wisdom into daily life. When you practice in this way, life itself becomes your teacher. You no longer need to search for extraordinary experiences or distant revelations. The person who annoys you, the mistake you make, the delay that tests your patience, These are your teachers. They show you where your heart is still closed and where it can open wider. Every event becomes a meditation, every relationship a mirror. This doesn't mean you must endure harm or suppress emotion. Boundaries are part of wisdom, but even as you set limits, you can do so without hatred. You can say no with a calm heart. You can walk away without resentment. The teaching is not about perfection, it's about presence. The goal is not to erase conflict, but to meet it with understanding. There will still be moments when you forget, when anger takes over, when fear blinds you, when you fall back into old patterns. That's natural. When you notice it, smile softly to yourself. Even remembering that you forgot is part of waking up. Each return to awareness strengthens the habit of seeing. The journey is not linear, it's a spiral that deepens with every turn. Through this gentle practice, you begin to taste a different kind of peace. Not the fragile peace of avoiding difficulty, but the living peace that coexists with all things. You realize that joy and sorrow are not enemies, they are two notes in the same melody. When you allow both to play, life becomes full. Over time, you may notice that gratitude begins to appear in the most unexpected places, even in moments that once felt unbearable. You look back and see how each hardship carved space inside you for more compassion, more depth, more love. You understand that the people who hurt you also awakened you. The failures you dreaded also freed you. Every collision was a conversation with life, guiding you home. To live with this understanding is to live with open eyes and an open heart. You stop needing the world to be perfect before you can rest. You rest inside imperfection itself. You begin to trust that life knows what it's doing, even when you don't. That trust is the essence of faith, not belief in something distant, but confidence in the present moment's wisdom. So the next time life presses against you, instead of tightening, breathe and soften. Ask quietly, what is life showing me here? And then listen, not with your mind, but with your whole being. Often, the answer comes not in words, but in a feeling of space, a sense of being held by something larger than the struggle. That is the stillness behind all motion, the calm within the storm. Let that stillness be your home. Let awareness be your refuge. From this space, even the hardest moments can become sacred. The collisions of life are no longer threats. They are invitations to return, again and again, to the center of being. When you live like this, you discover that every experience, pleasant or painful, has the same message. Wake up, see clearly, love anyway. And in that awakening, you realize that the true peace you sought was never far away. It was waiting quietly, in every touch, in every challenge, in every breath you take. When you are ready, we will step into the next chapter, a deeper exploration of how the mind moves between pleasure and pain, and how stillness reveals itself beneath both. You are listening to a gentle teaching from the Moonlight Temple series, wisdom drawn from ancient Buddhist roots, brought to life with care and presence. To fully receive the heart of these teachings, I invite you now to pause, soften the edges of your day, let your body rest, take in a slow, quiet breath, and exhale into stillness. Allow your awareness to return, not to the past, not to the future, but to this very moment. Nothing else is required, just your presence. If this offering has brought you a moment of peace, we gently invite you to support this journey by subscribing to the Moonlight Temple, sharing these teachings, or simply returning again when your heart needs rest. Every small act of presence helps this temple of silence grow. Chapter 3. Good and Evil, Right and Wrong, our only relative. One morning, a man came to the Buddha with a question that had been troubling him for years. "Master," he said, "I have tried to live a pure and virtuous life. I follow the precepts. I eat only plants. I avoid harming even the smallest creature. But still, my mind is never at rest. Tell me, is being vegetarian the only way to live without causing harm? Is that what it means to be truly good?" The Buddha looked at him with quiet compassion. He bent down, picked up a leaf from the ground, and held it between his fingers. "This leaf," he said softly, "was once part of a living tree. Its life, too, had value. When you cook vegetables, do you not also touch life?" The man hesitated, uncertain how to answer. The Buddha continued, "Every breath you take, every step you walk, every meal you eat, participates in the web of life. You cannot live in this world without touching other lives. Good and evil are not about what you touch, but about how you touch it, the heart behind the action. A kind mind brings peace, even in the midst of taking a life to survive. A confused mind creates harm even while claiming to do good." The man listened, stunned. All his life, he had divided the world into clean and unclean, pure and impure, righteous and sinful. But now he saw how small his circle of understanding had been. The Buddha's voice was calm and clear, like water flowing over stone. To cling to one side, good against evil, right against wrong, is to miss the middle way. The awakened mind does not deny good and evil, but it is not trapped by them. When you see the world as a field of opposites, you are always fighting with yourself. But when you see beyond the opposites, compassion naturally guides your actions." The man lowered his head. "Then, Master," he said, "how can I know what is right?" The Buddha smiled. "Right and wrong are born from conditions," he said. "What is right in one place may be wrong in another. What is good for one may be harmful to another. The wise do not cling to fixed ideas of goodness. They look deeply into cause and effect. They act from awareness, not from rule. When the heart is clear, action follows naturally. When the heart is clouded, even virtue becomes another form of attachment." He then told the man a parable. In a distant village, there lived a monk who refused to eat any food that came from killing, not even a plant plucked before it dropped naturally. He believed he was living in perfect purity. One day, a famine struck the land. The people around him starved, while the monk meditated in solitude, waiting for nature to offer food that had died on its own. When the villagers came begging for guidance, he told them he could not break his vow. But there was another monk nearby who saw the suffering. He took what little food remained, even roots and leaves, and shared them with the hungry. Some criticized him for breaking the vow of non-harming. Yet, when those villagers survived, they called him the most compassionate being they had ever known. "Now tell me," the Buddha said, "which monk truly lived by the spirit of compassion?" The man fell silent. He realized that moral purity without wisdom can become cruelty in disguise. Doing good is not about following rules, but about seeing clearly what love asks of us in each moment. The Buddha went on, "When the mind clings to rigid ideas of virtue, it becomes proud, and pride blinds compassion. When we act from self-righteousness, even a so-called good deed can sow the seeds of suffering. But when we act from understanding, even a small gesture, a smile, a meal shared, becomes a doorway to liberation." The man bowed deeply, his forehead touching the earth. He understood, at last, that the Buddha's teaching was not a law to obey, but a mirror to look into. The reflection he saw there was simple, yet profound. True goodness does not arise from fear of doing wrong. It arises from the clarity of seeing things as they are. That evening, as the sun set behind the trees, the man walked back through the forest. He noticed the sound of insects, the rustle of leaves, the rhythm of his own footsteps. For the first time, he did not separate them into good or bad. He simply listened. Everything, even the decay of fallen branches, seemed to sing the same quiet truth. Life is one, endlessly transforming, neither pure nor impure. He smiled to himself, remembering the Buddha's words. In the world of form, nothing is absolutely good or evil. The only difference lies in whether the mind is awake or asleep. From that day on, the man continued to live simply, but something in him had changed. He still cared for life, but not with the anxiety of perfection. When he ate with gratitude. When he walked gently. He understood now that the point was not to avoid all harm, an impossible task, but to live with awareness, humility, and love. And so, the story reminds us that morality in the Buddhist sense is not about strict compliance or purity, but about consciousness. The precepts are not chains, they are guiding lights. They help us see the heart behind our actions. What matters is not whether we appear good in the eyes of others, but whether we act from clarity and compassion. The Buddha's response to the man still echoes today, across centuries and cultures. Do not be attached to good or evil. Do not be lost in right or wrong. See beyond them, and you will act from peace. This is not an invitation to moral chaos. It is an invitation to maturity, to take responsibility for our own awareness, to respond to life freshly, not according to inherited ideas. When we cling to fixed categories, we live in fear of mistakes. But when we understand that every action can be met with awareness and care, we step into true freedom. The man who once sought perfection discovered something more real than perfection, understanding. And from that understanding came compassion, not the kind that divides, but the kind that embraces. That is the way of the awakened heart. It is not about always doing the right thing, but about seeing clearly enough that whatever we do becomes right in spirit. So, when we find ourselves judging others or judging ourselves, we can remember this simple truth. There is no absolute good or evil, no fixed right or wrong. There is only this moment and the intention we bring to it. If that intention is rooted in awareness and love, then even the smallest act becomes sacred. Take a quiet breath now. Feel how the world around you moves, imperfect, alive, interwoven. Nothing stands alone. The wind touches the trees feed the air sustains you. Every choice you make ripples through this living fabric. The goal is not to remain untouched, but to touch with care. That is what the Buddha meant when he said, "In this life, you cannot avoid harm, but you can awaken the heart that never harms intentionally." When we live from that heart, we are no longer bound by the dualities of good and evil. We become instruments of understanding, mirrors of life itself, reflecting everything, grasping nothing, moving gently through the world with eyes that see and a heart that forgives. And that, perhaps, is the deepest kind of goodness there is. In the quiet light of dawn, when the mind is still and the world has not yet demanded who you must be, something subtle can be felt. The truth that life does not divide itself into good or bad. It simply moves, breathes, and unfolds. The Buddha's teaching about the relativity of good and evil does not dismiss ethics or kindness. It reveals that our moral judgments often arise from the limited vision of the self. To see clearly is not to erase morality, but to awaken a wisdom that transcends it. The world we live in is built upon contrast, day and night, joy and sorrow, gain and loss. Without contrast, we could not perceive. Yet, as human beings, we mistake these contrasts for absolute divisions. We cling to one side, calling it good, and reject the other, calling it bad. The Buddha pointed out that this duality exists only within the conditioned mind, the mind that sees through separation. When awareness matures, it begins to perceive beyond these labels. Good and evil are not absolute realities, he said. They are shadows cast by the movement of intention. A kind action done with pride may carry seeds of suffering. A difficult truth spoken with compassion may become a healing force. What determines the moral weight of an act is not its appearance, but the mind from which it arises. Imagine two people helping a stranger in need. One acts to feel superior, to affirm their goodness. The other acts with quiet understanding, seeing no separation between self and other. Outwardly, both seem generous, but the first is driven by attachment to the image of being good, while the second moves from wisdom. The first seeks reward, the second simply responds to life. This difference, subtle yet profound, marks the line between moral performance and true compassion. The Buddha did not ask us to abandon right and wrong, but to see their conditional nature. What is right in one circumstance may become harmful in another. What brings relief to one person may cause pain to another. This fluidity is not a flaw in the moral fabric of the world. It is a reflection of interdependence. Life is not static, and truth cannot be frozen into a single rule. The awakened heart does not rely on formulas. It listens deeply to what the moment asks for. This is why the Buddha spoke of the middle way. It is not a compromise between extremes. It is freedom from them. The middle way sees the play of opposites without being caught in them. It knows that clinging to goodness can become its own form of suffering, a hidden pride, a quiet fear of imperfection. When you live by rigid ideas of virtue, you may judge others harshly or turn guilt inward upon yourself. But when you see that even morality is a wave in the ocean of conditions, you stop trying to be perfect and start learning to be real. Real goodness flows naturally from understanding. It is not forced, not performed. It doesn't need witnesses. It doesn't arise from the desire to be approved or from fear of doing wrong. It arises from clarity, from seeing the interconnectedness of all life. When you see that your own well-being is inseparable from the well-being of others, compassion ceases to be a moral duty. It becomes the most natural thing in the world. To understand this teaching is to step into humility. You begin to realize how narrow the human view can be. We call something evil because we see only its surface. We praise something as good because we benefit from it. Yet everything we experience is part of a vast chain of causes and effects, stretching beyond what we can comprehend. A storm may destroy a village and nourish a desert far away. A personal failure may break the heart open to wisdom. How, then, can we judge with certainty what is good or bad? The Buddha encouraged us to look not for perfection but for insight. The wise, he said, do not measure actions by appearance, but by their capacity to bring freedom from suffering. In this light, morality is not a rule book, but a compass, one that points toward liberation. When you act with mindfulness, honesty, and compassion, you are walking in harmony with this compass. But when your goodness becomes a mask for ego, the compass begins to spin. This is why the Buddha warned that attachment to virtue can become as binding as attachment to vice. The saint who condemns others may be further from awakening than the sinner who sees their own ignorance with humility. To cling to the idea of being good is to maintain the illusion of a self who owns goodness. True awakening reveals that goodness, like light, belongs to no one. It shines through all who are open. In daily life, we constantly encounter this dance of opposites. A parent must sometimes discipline a child, an act that appears harsh but may be rooted in love. A doctor must cause pain to heal. A teacher must challenge a student's comfort. In each case, goodness does not reside in the act itself, but in the wisdom and intention behind it. To see this clearly is to free ourselves from moral rigidity and awaken moral intelligence, the living, breathing awareness that guides us through complexity. This understanding does not make us careless. On the contrary, it makes us deeply responsible. When you know that right and wrong shift according to intention and circumstance, you stop relying on judgment and start cultivating awareness. You learn to ask in each situation, what will bring understanding? What will reduce suffering? The answers are never identical, but awareness itself is the constant guide. The Buddha often said that the awakened mind is like a mirror. It reflects everything, the beautiful and the ugly, without preference. It does not distort reality with desire or aversion. This is not moral indifference. It is the foundation of compassion. When you see the world without the filter of judgment, you recognize that even ignorance and cruelty arise from pain. You no longer divide humanity into good people and bad people. You see beings struggling with their own delusion. That seeing opens the heart. It's important to remember that beyond good and evil is not a rejection of ethics. It is the highest expression of them. A person who acts from awareness naturally brings harmony to the world. They do not need commandments to be kind, because kindness flows from their understanding. They do not harm, because they see that harming another is harming themselves. This is the morality of awakening, effortless, spontaneous, and free. If we look around, we can see how our modern world still struggles with this teaching. We label people quickly, heroes and villains, victims and perpetrators, saints and sinners. But life rarely fits into such neat categories. Everyone carries both light and shadow. Everyone acts from a mixture of clarity and confusion. When we recognize this, we become less judgmental, not because we excuse wrongdoing, but because we see its roots. We understand that healing comes not through condemnation, but through awareness. This understanding dissolves fear. You no longer strive to appear flawless or to defend your opinions as the only right view. You begin to live with humility, knowing that wisdom is larger than any single perspective. The good you once tried to perform becomes quieter, more natural. You live with gentleness rather than righteousness. And yet, even this awareness is not an endpoint. The Buddha's teaching continues to unfold. Beyond good and evil lies the simplicity of being, a state where action flows directly from mindfulness, not from calculation. When the heart is open and the mind is clear, each gesture becomes pure, not because it conforms to rules, but because it expresses reality as it is. To walk this path is to move from morality as control to morality as love. The first demands that we strive to be good. The second invites us to awaken to goodness already within us. The first breeds anxiety and pride. The second brings ease and humility. When we awaken to this, even the distinction between good and evil begins to dissolve into compassion. The Buddha once said, "The fragrance of virtue travels against the wind." It means that true goodness needs no defense. It cannot be confined to doctrine or label. It moves quietly, like a scent carried through the world by the natural flow of life itself. So when you feel confused about what is right or wrong, pause. Come back to the stillness beneath thought. In that quiet, ask not, is this good or bad? But, is this coming from love or from fear? The answer will guide you more deeply than any rule could. This is the wisdom that transcends morality without abandoning it. The wisdom that sees the relativity of good and evil while remaining rooted in compassion. When you live from that place, you find that every choice, no matter how small, becomes a reflection of your awakening. When you are ready, we will move to the final part of this chapter, a gentle reflection on how this understanding can illuminate daily life, helping us live with honesty, kindness, and deep acceptance of our shared humanity. When we first hear that good and evil, right and wrong, are only relative, it can sound unsettling, as if morality itself were being dissolved into confusion. But the Buddha's teaching does not invite chaos or indifference. It calls us into a deeper, more compassionate kind of understanding. It asks us to look beneath the surface of moral labels and see the living heart of every moment, the mind that intends, the awareness that sees, the love that understands. In our daily lives, we are constantly asked to choose what is right, what is wrong, what is good, what is bad. Yet these choices often bring tension, fear, and guilt. We try to be perfect, to always say the right thing, do the right thing, live the right way, and still we fail. And when we fail, we feel unworthy. The Buddha's wisdom gently reminds us that perfection was never the goal. Awareness is. To live ethically is not to be flawless, but to be awake, to see clearly what we are doing, why we are doing it, and how it affects the hearts of others. When we approach life in this way, the heavy burden of should begins to lift. We stop performing goodness as a costume and begin embodying it as a natural state of being. True goodness, as the Buddha taught, is not something we create. It is something that arises when ignorance and fear are released. Like a lake clearing after a storm, goodness appears naturally when the waters of the mind settle. Imagine a moment when someone harshly criticizes you. The immediate impulse might be to defend yourself, to prove you are right and they are wrong. But if you pause, even for a breath, and notice the heat rising inside, you begin to see the truth of your reaction. It isn't just about the words they said, it's about your own attachment to being seen as good, kind, or correct. When you recognize that attachment, a space opens. You don't need to fight or justify. You can simply see. And in that seeing, something tender happens. Compassion arises, not only for yourself, but for the one who hurt you too. In that moment of awareness, you are no longer trapped in the duality of right and wrong. You are resting in the living truth of now, where understanding and forgiveness can bloom. The Buddha called this the wisdom that sees without judgment. It is not passive, it is profoundly alive. It allows you to respond to life instead of reacting to it. Over time, this practice transforms how we view others. When someone behaves in a way we once labeled as bad, we begin to wonder, what pain might they be carrying? What misunderstanding drives them? This shift does not excuse harm, but it dissolves hatred. It replaces moral superiority with empathy. When you see the conditions that give rise to actions, you stop dividing the world into heroes and villains. You begin to see human beings, all of us, moving within the same web of ignorance and awakening. This insight leads to a kind of quiet forgiveness. You understand that everyone, including yourself, is doing the best they can from their current level of awareness. Some days you are patient and kind. Other days you are caught in anger or fear. But beneath it all, the same wish lives in every heart, to be free from suffering. When you truly grasp this, judgment begins to soften and a gentleness takes its place. This is where Buddhist practice becomes deeply practical. It teaches us to shift our attention from blame to understanding, from guilt to learning. Instead of saying, "I failed," we can say, "I see now. That action brought suffering. Let me understand why." This curiosity is the foundation of growth. The Buddha did not want followers who never erred. He wanted learners who observed their own minds with compassion. When you begin to live from this space, every mistake becomes a teacher. When you lose your temper, you can reflect, "What was I defending?" When you feel envy, you can ask, "What wound beneath this wants to be healed?" When you are praised, you can notice how the ego swells and gently smile at its vanity. These small acts of awareness are not moral exercises, they are invitations to freedom. The more you practice, the less you are bound by extremes. You stop clinging to the need to always be good, because you see that striving for goodness out of fear is still another form of suffering. You stop condemning others as bad, because you see how ignorance, not evil, gives rise to harm. You learn to live in the middle, the place of balance, where compassion and wisdom meet. This middle way does not mean apathy or detachment. It means engaging with life from the heart, without the distortion of rigid ideals. When someone behaves unkindly, you can still set boundaries. When injustice appears, you can still act firmly. But now your actions are not fueled by anger or moral pride. They come from clarity. You respond not because you must defend a side, but because you see what love asks of you in that moment. The Buddha often reminded his disciples that the awakened one does not divide the world into good and bad people. Instead, he sees beings as either awake or asleep, conscious or lost in illusion. The task, then, is not to condemn those who sleep, but to awaken gently, and in doing so, become a light for others. When your presence is grounded in awareness, your very being becomes a silent teaching. You do not have to preach goodness, you radiate it. This way of living also transforms how we relate to ourselves. Many people carry deep shame for past actions, harsh words spoken, selfish decisions made, moments of cowardice or cruelty. But when we look through the lens of the Buddha's wisdom, we see that even these actions arose from confusion, not from inherent evil. If we had seen more clearly then, we would have acted differently. Seeing this truth allows forgiveness to blossom. It allows you to hold yourself, your younger, more ignorant self, with understanding instead of punishment. Self-forgiveness is not denial. It is honesty infused with kindness. It says, "Yes, I did this, and it caused pain. I cannot change the past, but I can understand it, learn from it, and let compassion grow." That is how transformation happens, not by judgment, but by awareness. When you live with this kind of awareness, you start to see goodness everywhere, even in places that seem dark. You notice how suffering awakens tenderness, how mistakes awaken humility, how imperfection awakens love. You begin to trust that life itself, with all its messiness, is an unfolding of wisdom. Every experience, pleasant or painful, becomes an opportunity to wake up. Perhaps that is what the Buddha meant when he said, "Within every illusion lies the seed of awakening." The goal is not to escape the world's complexity, but to meet it with an open heart. You stop needing clear lines between right and wrong because you now live from a deeper clarity, the understanding that all things arise and pass, that everyone is learning, that love is the only truth that endures. This understanding also brings peace to your relationships. You no longer need others to behave a certain way for you to feel at ease. You can listen without trying to correct. You can disagree without hostility. You can let people be as they are and still care deeply for them. The desire to fix or control softens into the desire to understand. And when you face your own limitations, you can smile softly. You can say, "This too is part of the path." You stop expecting enlightenment to erase your humanity. Instead, you let enlightenment shine through your humanity, through your laughter, your tears, your vulnerability. You become more real, not less. Over time, this way of living ripples outward. You begin to see how every judgment, every act of understanding, every breath of kindness contributes to the world's balance. You realize that your smallest choices, the tone of your voice, the patience in your listening, shape the moral fabric of reality more deeply than any abstract concept of good or evil. In the end, the Buddha's teaching on moral relativity is not an argument about ethics. It is an invitation to awaken to love. Love is the ground that holds all opposites. When love is present, right and wrong lose their sharp edges. Every act becomes a reflection of awareness. Every moment becomes an opportunity to embody compassion. So, when you find yourself uncertain, when life presents no clear answer, when you don't know which path is right, pause. Feel the breath move through you. Let the noise of judgment fall away. In the quiet that remains, ask softly, "What would love do here?" And then listen, not with the mind that divides, but with the heart that understands. That listening is the beginning and the end of all moral clarity. It is the path that never fails. It is, as the Buddha said, the only true good, the wisdom of the heart that harms none and holds all. When you are ready, we will move to the next chapter, an exploration of how awakening reveals itself not through perfection, but through the beauty of impermanence and the stillness within change. You are listening to a gentle teaching from the Moonlight Temple series, wisdom drawn from ancient Buddhist roots, brought to life with care and presence. To fully receive the heart of these teachings, I invite you now to pause, soften the edges of your day, let your body rest. Take in a slow, quiet breath and exhale into stillness. Allow your awareness to return, not to the past, not to the future, but to this very moment. Nothing else is required, just your presence. If this offering has brought you a moment of peace, we gently invite you to support this journey by subscribing to the Moonlight Temple, sharing these teachings, or simply returning again when your heart needs rest. Every small act of presence helps this temple of silence grow. Chapter 4: Impermanence. Seeing change without a shaken heart. There was once a devoted disciple who spent months building a stupa, a beautiful monument of devotion, for his beloved teacher. Every day, from dawn until dusk, he carried stones, mixed clay, shaped tiles, and worked under the sunday. His hands bled, his back ached, but his heart was filled with joy. This was his offering, his way of expressing gratitude for the wisdom that had awakened him. When the stupa was finally finished, it stood tall and radiant under the morning light. The villagers gathered for the dedication ceremony. Bells chimed softly. The disciple bowed before the teacher, tears of joy glistening in his eyes. "Master," he said, "I have built this stupa so that your teachings will last forever." The teacher smiled gently. "Forever?" he asked. The disciple nodded earnestly, not understanding the quiet humor in his master's voice. That afternoon, a storm gathered in the distance. The wind began to howl, pulling at the trees. The clouds thickened and burst open with rain. The villagers ran for shelter. The disciple, anxious for his sacred monument, tried to protect it with cloth and ropes, but the storm was merciless. Lightning split the sky. A great crack echoed. The stupa began to crumble. Within moments, the structure collapsed into mud and scattered stones. The next morning, when the storm had passed, the disciple sat in the ruins. His heart was heavy. Tears streamed down his face as he whispered, "Impermanence is so cruel. I built this with all my devotion, and now it's gone. Everything is impermanent, and that is suffering." The master approached quietly and stood beside him. "My dear one," he said softly, "if you truly saw impermanence, you would not be weeping." The disciple looked up, confused. "But Master," he said, "you yourself have taught that all things change, that nothing lasts. Is this not what impermanence means?" The teacher sat down beside him, picking up a small piece of broken stone. "Yes," he said, "you have understood impermanence with your mind, but not yet with your heart. You knew the stupa would not last, but you still hoped it would. You accepted change in words, but not in truth. The pain you feel is not caused by impermanence itself, but by the mind that resists it." The disciple listened, his tears slowing. The teacher continued, "When one truly sees impermanence, there is no sorrow, only peace. You see that birth and decay, creation and destruction, are not opposites. They are partners in the same dance. The stupa was never meant to endure. It was a form arising from emptiness, destined to return. Its fall is not a tragedy, but a truth. Look closely. Even now, the soil that remains will nourish new life. What has truly been lost?" The disciple gazed at the ruins. The morning sun was glinting off the wet stones. Tiny shoots of grass were already pushing up between the cracks. The air smelled clean, alive. He felt something shift within him, a quiet release. "I see now," he whispered. "The suffering is not in impermanence, but in my wish to hold what cannot be held." The teacher nodded. "Exactly. Impermanence is not your enemy. It is the nature of all things. It is the reason the flower blooms, the child grows, and the seasons turn. Without impermanence, there would be no birth, no change, no awakening. The only pain lies in the illusion that anything could stay as it is." He placed a hand gently on his student's shoulder. "When you understand this deeply, the mind becomes still, like a lake that no longer trembles with every breeze. You see the arising and passing of all things, and you remain unmoved, not because you are indifferent, but because you are free." The disciple looked around again, and suddenly he saw not ruin, but transformation. What had fallen apart was simply returning to the earth, to become something else. The sadness that once felt heavy began to dissolve into a strange calm. The same wind that had destroyed the stupa now cooled his skin. The same rain that had drenched his robes was nourishing the soil. Nothing had truly disappeared. It had only changed form. He turned to his teacher and bowed deeply. "Master," he said, "I think I am beginning to see." The teacher smiled. "Do not rush to understand," he said. "Let it reveal itself to you. True seeing does not happen in the head, it happens in the heart that stops fighting what is." For many days after, the disciple returned to the ruins. He no longer tried to rebuild. Instead, he sat quietly, watching how sunlight played on the stones, how insects made homes in the cracks, how new green shoots emerged where the foundation once stood. Each day, he saw change more clearly, and each day, his heart grew more still. Over time, the ruins became a place of meditation. Travelers would pass by and ask, "Why do you sit among these broken stones?" The disciple would smile and say, "Because they are teaching me how to live." And indeed, they were. Through the rise and fall of that humble stupa, he came to understand a profound truth. Impermanence is not something to grieve, it is the heartbeat of life itself. To resist it is to suffer endlessly. To embrace it is to awaken. The story of the disciple and the stupa speaks to something universal, something every human heart knows. We build not only temples of stone, but also temples of identity, relationships, and dreams. We want the things we love to last. We want to hold the moments that make us feel alive. But every tower we build, no matter how beautiful, will one day fall. That is not a failure of life, it is life. The Buddha called impermanence anicca, one of the three marks of existence. He did not describe it to sadden us, but to set us free. When we stop expecting permanence, we stop clinging. And when we stop clinging, we discover peace that no loss can destroy. The disciples' tears were the same tears we all shed when the inevitable happens, when love changes, when health fades, when plans dissolve, when what we thought was secure begins to crumble. But as his teacher reminded him, the pain of impermanence is born not from the change itself, but from our resistance to it. If we look closely, every ending carries within it the seed of a beginning. The flower that wilts returns to the earth to feed another bloom. The relationship that ends leaves space for deeper understanding. The day that fades gives birth to the quiet beauty of night. Impermanence does not take, it transforms. When we realize this, life becomes less of a struggle and more of a flowing. We learn to move with the tide instead of against it. We learn to love fully, knowing that every moment is precious, precisely because it will not last. The sweetness of life is in its passing. That is what the disciple came to see in the ruins of his stupa, that nothing needed to stay forever to be meaningful. The stupa had fulfilled its purpose, to awaken him to truth. The lesson had always been hidden within the very stones he built, waiting for the storm to reveal it. The teacher's final words to him were simple. When you can see a flower wilt without sorrow, a cloud dissolve without regret, and your own breath come and go without clinging, then you will understand impermanence, not as loss, but as liberation. And from that day, the disciple no longer prayed for things to last. He prayed only for the wisdom to see their passing clearly, and for the heart to remain still in the midst of change. For that, as his teacher said, is true peace. To see impermanence is not merely to notice that things change. Everyone knows that much. The deeper understanding lies in how the awakened mind relates to change. For most of us, the awareness that everything is transient brings sadness or fear. We cling to what is beautiful and familiar, and when it slips away, we grieve. But the Buddha's teaching reveals a quieter truth. When you truly see impermanence, the heart no longer trembles. There is no fear in seeing what was always so. Instead, there is peace, because you are no longer fighting reality. Impermanence, or anicca, is one of the most profound and liberating insights of Buddhist wisdom. It is not an abstract philosophy, but a living truth that unfolds in every breath. Everything that arises will pass, not as a punishment, but because that is its nature. The body ages, relationships evolve, emotions appear and fade like waves on the sea. Even joy and sorrow, which seem so personal, are movements of impermanence. They come, they peak, they dissolve. To see this clearly is to stop clinging to what is fleeting and to awaken to what is timeless, the space of awareness in which all change occurs. The Buddha taught that ignorance, avijja, is the refusal to see impermanence as it is. It is the illusion that something can be made permanent. Health, youth, love, reputation, control. We build our identities around what cannot last, and so we suffer. The mind says, I must keep this, I cannot lose that. And yet the river of life keeps flowing. When the inevitable changes come, we cry out, why is this happening to me? But impermanence is not personal. It is not an event happening to you. It is the very fabric of existence. Imagine standing beside a flowing river. You cannot step into the same water twice, because the current never stops moving. Yet most of us live as though we could dam the river and hold it still. We try to freeze moments, to possess people, to protect conditions that make us feel safe. This attempt to stop the flow is the root of suffering. The Buddha called it tanha, or craving, the thirst for permanence in a world that never stands still. When the disciple in the story wept over the fallen stupa, his suffering did not come from the storm but from this very thirst. He could not yet accept that what rises must fall, that creation and dissolution are two sides of one breath. His teacher's gentle reminder, if you truly saw impermanence, you would not be weeping, was not a reprimand, but an invitation. It pointed him toward the heart of insight, that the world is not broken because it changes. Change is the world's nature. When we see impermanence not as an idea but as reality, the mind begins to soften. We become less rigid, less demanding. The people we love, the experiences we cherish, even our own bodies, we stop insisting they remain as they are. Instead of holding, we begin to accompany. Instead of fearing loss, we start to appreciate presence. Every moment becomes precious, not because it will last forever, but because we know it will not. The Buddha often compared life to a bubble on the surface of a stream, delicate, luminous, and fleeting. He did not say this to make us despair, but to help us see beauty in fragility. A bubble is not meaningless because it bursts. Its brief shimmer is what makes it beautiful. Likewise, each experience, each connection, each breath has its sacred place in time. To live fully is to bow to its impermanence, not to fight it. In the Mahaparinibbana Sutta, the Buddha's final words were, all conditioned things are impermanent. Strive diligently. These words are both tender and profound. They remind us that since everything changes, we must not delay awakening. There is no time to waste chasing illusions of permanence, youth, wealth, recognition, or even fixed beliefs. To strive diligently means to live with awareness in each fleeting moment, to be present with what is arising and passing away right now. When we resist impermanence, we are resisting life itself. But when we welcome it, we align ourselves with the way of things. The awakened mind does not cling to what appears or mourn what disappears. It simply sees, without attachment, without aversion. This seeing is not cold detachment. It is intimacy with all that is. It is the realization that to love fully is to let go completely. This insight also transforms how we understand suffering. Normally, we believe that pain comes from loss, the end of a relationship, the passing of a loved one, the collapse of a dream. But the Buddha taught that suffering arises not from change itself, but from our unwillingness to change with it. Pain is natural, but suffering is resistance. When we stop resisting, even grief becomes a form of love, an expression of how deeply we have cared. To see impermanence deeply is to see that everything we experience is part of a vast unfolding. When one form dissolves, another emerges. What we call death is not an end, but a transformation, a continuation in new forms. The tree that falls becomes soil. The soil nourishes seeds. The seeds become new life. This is the law of nature, and it applies not only to the outer world, but to our inner life as well. Thoughts die and give birth to new insights. Old selves fade and new understandings bloom. When the Buddha spoke of impermanence, he also spoke of liberation. He said that when the mind sees the arising and passing of all things, it becomes disenchanted, not in a cynical way, but in a freeing way. It loses its fascination with what cannot last. It stops chasing after pleasure or fleeing from pain. It sees both as waves on the same ocean, and when the mind no longer clings, the ocean itself, vast, still, and boundless, is revealed. This is what it means to see impermanence with wisdom. It is not about cold acceptance, but about warm understanding. It is about learning to live with an open hand, not a closed fist. To open the hand is to trust life, to know that even when something precious slips away, life itself is still here, flowing through you, as you. Consider the rhythm of your own breath. Each inhale is born, each exhale dies, and yet you do not grieve the breath that leaves you. You let it go, trusting that another will come. What if we could relate to all of life this way? To love fully, to experience deeply, and to let go completely, breath by breath. This is the practice of impermanence. To live this way does not make us indifferent, it makes us tender. Because we know everything passes, we cherish it more deeply. Because we know people leave, we love them more sincerely. Because we know joy fades, we savor it fully. Awareness of impermanence is not an escape from life, it is a fuller participation in it. It is the difference between holding a flower in fear of its wilting and holding it in gratitude for its bloom. In Zen, there is a saying, "The cherry blossom falls when it is most beautiful." It reminds us that endings are not failures. They are part of perfection. When we cling to permanence, we miss the beauty of the unfolding. When we see the whole cycle, birth, growth, decay, renewal, we see the poetry of existence. The falling of the blossom, the setting of the sun, even the fading of love, all are gestures of the same truth. Nothing is lost, only transformed. When the heart truly understands this, something remarkable happens. Fear begins to dissolve. You no longer live in constant anxiety about losing what you love, because you realize that love itself is not bound by form. What you love, the kindness, the presence, the life, continues in new expressions. The Buddha called this anatta, or non-self, the recognition that there is no fixed I to lose or to keep. Just life, endlessly moving, endlessly renewing. So, to see impermanence with wisdom is to see with stillness. The world continues to rise and fall, to appear and disappear. But the awakened heart remains steady, not frozen, but free. It is the calm of a mountain surrounded by changing clouds, the clarity of the sky behind every storm, and from that stillness, compassion naturally blooms. You begin to understand others' fears and clingings because you have seen your own. You hold the world more gently, knowing it cannot be held forever. You walk through life like the Buddha himself, not avoiding change, but walking peacefully within it. This is the heart of impermanence, not despair, but serenity, not detachment, but deep intimacy with all that lives and dies. When you see this truth clearly, You no longer weep for what falls apart, because you see that nothing ever truly leaves. When you are ready, we will continue to the final part of this chapter, a gentle reflection on how to live this wisdom in daily life, finding calm in the midst of loss and peace in every passing moment. To live with the understanding of impermanence is not about retreating from the world. It is about returning to it with new eyes, eyes that no longer cling, no longer resist, but see clearly. When you truly see impermanence, life becomes softer. You stop fighting the rhythm of time and begin to move with it, like a leaf floating gently along the current of a stream. In everyday life, we often treat change as something to be controlled. We plan, we secure, we hold. But control is a subtle form of fear, a fear that what we love might vanish. The truth is, it will. Everything changes. The people we adore, the dreams we chase, even our own reflection in the mirror, all will shift, fade, and transform. To see this not as tragedy, but as truth, is the beginning of peace. When something precious leaves, a loved one, a relationship, a chapter of life, the heart naturally aches. But we can meet that ache with awareness instead of despair. The Buddha did not teach us to suppress emotion. He taught us to see through it. When grief arises, breathe with it. When longing returns, notice its shape, its color, its temperature. Let it come, let it go. This is how impermanence teaches compassion, not by erasing pain, but by showing us how to stay kind within it. You may remember a time when you were certain something would last, a friendship, a sense of stability, a season of joy. And then, without warning, it changed. At first, you might have felt betrayed by life, as if the universe had broken its promise. But over time, perhaps you saw that nothing was stolen from you. Things simply followed their nature. The friendship evolved. The stability shifted into growth. The joy transformed into understanding. Life did not fail you. It unfolded. Every moment, something in you is being born, and something is dying. You are not the same person you were a year ago, or even yesterday. Your thoughts change. Your cells change. Your emotions shift like clouds in the sky. If you truly observe this, not intellectually, but with presence, you begin to sense the miracle of impermanence. It is not destruction, it is transformation. The Buddha compared this realization to the calm that comes when one stops trying to stop the tide. You no longer build walls against the waves, you learn to swim. The ocean remains vast and unpredictable, but you are no longer drowning in resistance. This is the stillness that arises when the mind accepts the law of change. In daily life, practicing this truth begins in small ways. When you drink your morning tea, notice its warmth, how it gradually cools, how each sip is slightly different. When you listen to someone speak, notice how their voice rises and falls, how each word disappears as soon as it is spoken. When you breathe, notice how every inhalation comes to an end, making space for the next. These small moments reveal the same universal rhythm. Everything is appearing, dissolving, and appearing again. To live with awareness of impermanence does not mean to live without care. It means to care without clinging. You can love deeply without fear of loss. You can give yourself fully to each experience, knowing it will change. In fact, impermanence deepens love, because it teaches you to cherish what is here now. You no longer postpone gratitude. You no longer say, "I'll be happy when." You understand that this moment, this fleeting breath, is all there truly is. This understanding also brings freedom from regret. So often we replay the past, wishing it could have gone differently. But when you see impermanence clearly, you realize that even the past is not fixed. It continues to live and transform in your memory, in your lessons, in who you are becoming. The past has already changed. It exists now only as understanding, and the future, which we worry over endlessly, is just a possibility that has not yet taken form. The only real place to live is this moment, fluid, alive, and already dissolving into the next. Impermanence also teaches humility. When you remember that nothing lasts, pride loses its grip. Success and failure, praise and blame, joy and sorrow, they all move through the same revolving door. You begin to see that no single moment defines you. What matters is not what you cling to, but how you meet each change. The wise person does not try to hold on to happiness, nor do they despair in sadness. They simply bow to both as passing guests. There is a quiet dignity in this kind of acceptance. It is not resignation, it is trust. Trust that life knows what it is doing, even when you do not. Trust that loss carries hidden gifts. Trust that what ends makes space for what is beginning. Sometimes, the most painful transformations become our greatest teachers. A heartbreak can reveal the depth of our capacity to love. A failure can open the door to humility and wisdom. Even illness or aging, when met with awareness, can become pathways to awakening, gentle reminders that everything the ego clings to is temporary, but the consciousness that witnesses it is vast and serene. This is what the Buddha meant when he spoke of seeing the arising and passing of all things. It is not a cold observation, it is a warm surrender. It is understanding that nothing truly belongs to you, not your possessions, not your relationships, not even your body, and that this is not a loss, but liberation. The freedom comes from knowing you were never meant to hold it all. You were only meant to love it while it was here. In Zen, there is an image often used to describe this wisdom. The moon reflected on the surface of water. The reflection is beautiful, yet untouchable. If you try to grasp it, it shatters. But if you simply behold it, still, open, present, you experience its full beauty. Life is like that. Everything you love is a reflection on the water of time. You cannot hold it, but you can see it, honor it, and let it pass without breaking the surface of your own heart. When you practice this way of seeing, peace begins to take root. The storms of life still come, loss, change, endings, but they no longer uproot you. You start to live with the calm strength of a tree whose roots reach deep into the earth. Winds may shake the branches, but the tree remains grounded. Likewise, when the winds of impermanence blow, you can sway without breaking. Each moment becomes enough. You do not need to demand permanence from a world that cannot give it. You do not need to bargain with time. You simply rest in the awareness that watches all things rise and fall. This awareness, spacious, luminous, untouched, is what the Buddha called the deathless. It is not something you create, it is what remains when you stop clinging to what passes. When you see impermanence this way, even suffering takes on a sacred tone. It is no longer an enemy to escape, but a teacher that shows you where you are still holding on. Each time you release, the heart expands a little more. Each letting go becomes an opening, and eventually, you realize that impermanence has not been taken from you, it has been giving you back to yourself. So when the next wave of change comes, as it surely will, meet it with a calm heart. Remember the disciple and his fallen stupor. Remember the teacher's gentle words. If you truly saw impermanence, you would not be weeping. Take a breath, feel it rise and fall. Let this breath remind you of all things, appearing, disappearing, returning. Let it whisper to you the truth that brings peace, that nothing is ever truly lost, only transformed. And in that quiet knowing, the heart becomes still. Not because the world has stopped changing, but because you have stopped resisting. You have learned to dance with impermanence, and that dance, tender and fleeting, is the essence of awakening. You are listening to a gentle teaching from the Moonlight Temple series, wisdom drawn from ancient Buddhist roots, brought to life with care and presence. To fully receive the heart of these teachings, I invite you now to pause. Soften the edges of your day. Let your body rest. Take in a slow, quiet breath and exhale into stillness. Allow your awareness to return, not to the past, not to the future, but to this very moment. Nothing else is required. Just your presence. If this offering has brought you a moment of peace, we gently invite you to support this journey by subscribing to the Moonlight Temple, sharing these teachings, or simply returning again when your heart needs rest. Every small act of presence helps this temple of silence grow. Chapter 5. Returning to pure awareness, the true meaning of coming home to the source. A young meditation student once approached his teacher with great frustration. For many years, he had practiced diligently, sitting for long hours, breathing carefully, watching his thoughts as they came and went. Yet despite all his effort, peace seemed to slip through his fingers. He bowed deeply and said, "Master, I have tried to stay mindful every moment of the day. I remind myself constantly to be aware, while walking, while eating, while speaking, but my awareness keeps breaking. I cannot keep it continuous. What am I doing wrong?" The teacher looked at him kindly. His eyes were serene, yet filled with a quiet humor. "Continuous?" he asked. "What do you mean by continuous?" The student replied, "I mean unbroken, like a stream of awareness that never fades, always watching, always present." The teacher smiled. "Ah," he said softly, "you have fallen into the trap of time." The student frowned, confused. "The trap of time?" "Yes," the teacher said. "The idea that awareness must be stretched across past and future, as if you could carry mindfulness like a thread through every second. But awareness does not belong to time. The moment you try to make it continuous, you have already stepped out of it. Awareness is only ever now, not before, not after. There is no need to hold it together. Just be here, completely, in this breath. When you are truly here, there is no gap to fill." The student paused, feeling something loosen within him, but old habits of striving ran deep. "So, Master," he said hesitantly, "I shouldn't try to be mindful all the time?" The teacher laughed gently. "If you are trying, you are already one step away from it. True mindfulness is not effort. It is intimacy with what is. When you eat, know that you are eating. When you walk, know that you are walking. When you breathe, feel the breath. That's all. Awareness doesn't need to last forever. It just needs to be complete, right now. When you are whole in this moment, that wholeness is timeless." The student sat quietly, absorbing the words. He had spent so many years chasing some ideal of continuous enlightenment, as if awakening were a line drawn across endless time. Now he began to sense that the truth might be far simpler, that the awakened state was not something to be achieved, but something already here, waiting to be recognized. The teacher poured tea into 2 cups, the sound of water filling the silence between them. "When you drink," he said, "just drink. Do not add the thought, 'I am being mindful now.' The moment you label it, you step outside it. The mind that watches itself too tightly cannot rest. Awareness is like an open sky, vast, spacious, and self-sustaining. Clouds pass through it, but the sky never holds onto them. He handed the student a cup. The student received it carefully, noticing the warmth against his palms, the rising steam, the faint fragrance. For the first time, he did not try to be aware. He simply felt what was happening, the breath, the heartbeat, the tea, and something shifted. In that instant, there was no I meditating, no I observing, no separation between the drinker and the act of drinking. There was only experience, pure, direct, alive. The sound of the wind outside, the taste of the tea, the beating of the heart, everything was part of the same quiet wholeness. The teacher watched him and smiled knowingly. You see, he said, when you stop trying to keep awareness, awareness keeps you. The student looked up, eyes wide, as if seeing the world for the first time. So this simple being, this is what you mean by awakening. The teacher nodded. It has always been this. You were never apart from it, only distracted by the effort to find it. Awareness is not something you must maintain. It is your natural state. You don't need to hold the sky together. It already holds everything. He continued. The problem is not that awareness fades. It's that you keep measuring it. You keep comparing this moment with the last one. You keep asking, am I aware now? Am I losing it? But true awareness is beyond such questions. It is not an achievement. It is the simple knowing that is already present, whether you notice it or not. The student sat quietly for a long time, listening to the sound of the rain beginning to fall outside. Every drop felt like a wordless teaching. He realized how his practice had been full of tension, a constant attempt to grasp at peace, to maintain control over his mind. But peace, he now understood, could not be caught. It could only be allowed. He remembered something the Buddha once said: do not seek nirvana elsewhere. Stop and see, nirvana is here. It dawned on him that coming home to the source was not about going anywhere or becoming anything new. It was about returning to what had never left, the silent knowing that observes without judgment, that receives without resistance. When he looked back at his teacher, he saw not a figure of authority, but a mirror. In the teacher's calm presence, he saw his own natural awareness reflected back to him, steady, unforced, and infinite. Master, he said softly, all this time, I thought practice was about effort. Now I see it's about allowing. The teacher smiled, his eyes glimmering with quiet joy. Yes, he said, allowing, but not laziness. True allowing is alert, alive. It is not falling asleep. It is waking up from the dream of control. He gestured toward the rain again. See the drops falling. None of them are trying to fall continuously. They simply fall. And yet, the rain never stops. Awareness is like that. Each moment is complete, and yet the stream of life flows endlessly. The continuity you sought was never about holding on. It was about letting go. The student closed his eyes, feeling the rhythm of the rain blend with his breath. He could sense, faintly, the truth his teacher was pointing toward. That awareness was not something he could do. It was what remained when the doer relaxed. That evening, as he walked back to his hut, the student noticed the world differently. The sound of the rain against the leaves, the glimmer of lantern light on wet stones, even the faint scent of wood smoke, all of it was vivid, effortless, intimate. He realized He was not watching these things from a distance. He was part of them. The world and his awareness were not two. There was no longer a sense of maintaining mindfulness. There was simply presence. He understood, at last, what his teacher meant by coming home to the source. It was not a destination somewhere ahead in time, but the recognition that the home he sought had never been lost. And so, without effort, without striving, the student began to live his practice, not as a task to complete, but as a continuous returning to now. Each step became a teaching. Each breath became a reminder, and in that simplicity, he found what all his striving could not deliver, the peace that had been here all along. The teacher's final words echoed in his heart. When you stop searching for the eternal, you will find it everywhere, in each moment that you fully live. The Buddha once said, when you stop running after what changes, you awaken to what never moves. This is the heart of returning to pure awareness, what ancient teachings called coming home to the source. It is not a place to reach, not a state to build or maintain. It is the simple, luminous knowing that has always been present, quietly aware beneath every thought, every emotion, every breath. In ordinary life, most of us live on the surface of the mind, chasing thoughts, reacting to feelings, judging, planning, comparing. We believe that awareness is something we do, something we must hold or cultivate through effort. Yet the more we try to be aware, the further we move from it. Awareness is not something to create. It is what remains when you stop trying. When the Buddha spoke of coming home, he pointed to the end of seeking, not because the journey is denied, but because its destination has always been here. Every sound, every sensation, every moment of life is already held in the vast openness of awareness. The mind's restlessness makes us forget this. We search for peace as though it were hidden somewhere else, in a future moment, a different state of being, a perfected self. But peace is not something to gain. It is what we discover when the search ends. Imagine a pond stirred by wind. The water ripples and distorts the reflection of the moon. We may believe that the moon itself is broken, but it is only the water that moves. When the wind settles, the moon has always been there, calm, whole, untouched. Our awareness is like that. Thoughts and emotions are the ripples, conditions come and go, but the knowing itself, the silent, observing presence, remains unchanged. The Buddha called this tathata, suchness, the direct experience of reality before the mind labels it. To live in suchness is to live without grasping or rejecting, without turning the present into an object to control. It is to see with the eyes of stillness. In this stillness, there is no observer watching something separate. There is just knowing, the sound of the wind, the feeling of breath, the warmth of sunlight. Nothing is outside of awareness, because awareness is what everything arises within. Most people mistake mindfulness for effort. We think, I must keep attention, I must stay alert, I must not lose focus. But that very striving strengthens the sense of a me trying to reach something. True mindfulness, as the teacher told the student in the story, is not continuous in time, it is complete in presence. You don't need to be aware forever, you just need to be fully here now. This is why the Buddha said, stop, and you will find nirvana right here. When you stop chasing what you already are, the endless movement of seeking comes to rest. The mind stops running forward, and in that stillness, the natural clarity of awareness shines through, clear, open, selfless. The question often arises, if awareness is always here, why do we not feel it? The answer is simple. We are too busy identifying with what passes through it. Thoughts arise, we call them mine. Emotions appear, we say, I am angry, I am sad. We grasp at sensations, memories, images, believing that awareness depends on them. But awareness is not a thought, not a feeling, not a self. It is the space in which all those come and go. Think of the sky again. Clouds drift, storms gather, rain falls, sunlight returns, yet the sky itself is never harmed. Awareness is like that sky. You cannot lose it, though you may forget to notice it. Every thought that arises in the mind is just another cloud, passing through. When you see this clearly, you begin to relax into a deeper trust, the trust that even confusion, even distraction, happens within awareness, not outside of it. This recognition changes how we practice. Instead of forcing concentration, we cultivate intimacy. Instead of chasing stillness, we allow the noise to be seen as part of the whole. Meditation is no longer about escaping the world, but awakening within it. When we eat, we know we are eating. When we walk, we feel the earth beneath our feet. When we breathe, we sense the rhythm of life itself, moving through us. The Buddha described this as sati, presence infused with clear knowing. It is not a cold awareness, but a compassionate one, open and tender. When awareness is pure, it naturally includes everything: sound, silence, joy, sorrow, without dividing or resisting. There is no need to control or suppress experience, because awareness does not depend on what happens. It simply shines, like light illuminating whatever enters its path. This is why the awakened ones are described as serene in all circumstances. They do not escape change or pain. They simply rest in what sees both. Awareness cannot be disturbed because it is not part of the storm. It is the vastness in which the storm unfolds. You may notice this directly if you pause right now. Feel your breath, the rise and fall, the subtle movement of air. Notice the sounds around you, maybe the hum of distant traffic or the quiet rustle of leaves. Let them be, without naming. In this simple noticing, can you sense the awareness that holds it all? It doesn't belong to you. It doesn't need your effort. It is already aware. This is what the Zen masters call original mind, the mind before thought. Not an empty void, but a living stillness. When you return to this, even briefly, you realize that you have never truly left it. The seeking mind was only moving in circles inside it, like waves upon the ocean trying to find the sea. In this recognition, something profound dissolves, the illusion of separation between observer and observed. Usually, we experience life as a duality. I am here, the world is out there. I am meditating, thoughts are distractions. But in pure awareness, this split disappears. There is no meditator and no meditation, only awareness aware of itself. When the mind stops dividing reality into me and it, peace naturally arises, not as an achievement, but as the natural state of things. The Buddha once said that the greatest miracle is to walk on earth with full awareness. He did not mean performing supernatural acts. He meant seeing clearly the miracle of now, hearing a bird, feeling the breath, touching the moment as it is. When you live like this, ordinary life becomes sacred. Washing a cup, sweeping the floor, even waiting in line, each is an opportunity to rest in what never changes amid everything that does. Awareness, when recognized, transforms perception. You begin to see that nothing is ever truly mundane. Every experience, even the most ordinary, becomes radiant because it reflects the light of presence. The tree outside your window, the sound of footsteps, the taste of tea, all are expressions of the same awareness looking back at itself. This insight has been expressed beautifully by many teachers. One said, "Before enlightenment, I chopped wood and carried water. After enlightenment, I chopped wood and carried water. The outer actions remained the same, but the inner quality changed completely. What was once done mechanically became an expression of wholeness. Nothing was separate anymore. To come home to the source, then, is not to withdraw from life but to live it more deeply, with the understanding that every moment arises from awareness and dissolves back into it. When you know this, even suffering becomes part of the dance, a wave on the same ocean of knowing. You no longer need to escape it or fix it. You meet it with stillness, compassion, and understanding. The Buddha often compared awakening to remembering something you had forgotten. Awareness has always been here, silently witnessing your entire life. It was here in childhood wonder, in the joys and sorrows of growing up, in every success and every heartbreak. It watched all of it, untouched. And now, it watches you seek it, even though it has never left. To return to pure awareness is to stop searching and start seeing, to recognize that you are already home. When this insight deepens, time itself begins to lose its grip. You no longer live in the tension between before and after. You live in the timeless now, where life is fresh, spontaneous, and alive. The teacher in the story said, "Be complete in this moment. That is the whole path." You do not need to stretch awareness across time. You only need to enter it fully, now. When you do, you will discover that awareness was never broken, never absent. It was only covered by the noise of striving. This is the essence of the teaching, that awakening is not about becoming something greater, but seeing what has always been whole. And in that seeing, the mind rests, the heart opens, and life, just as it is, becomes enough. To live with awareness is not to live apart from the world. It is not an escape into silence or detachment, but a returning, a gentle, conscious returning to what is here, exactly as it is. The Buddha's path has always been one of direct experience. He never asked his followers to believe blindly, but to look deeply, to see for themselves. When we speak of coming home to the source, we are not describing a mystical journey to another realm, but the rediscovery of the awareness that has quietly accompanied us through every breath, every joy, every sorrow. Awareness is not somewhere else. It is not waiting in a temple or hiding in the mountains. It is right here, in the warmth of your hands as you hold a cup, in the rhythm of your breathing as you listen, in the still space between your thoughts. It is the silent witness of all movement, and yet it is not separate from the movement itself. Awareness is not something we need to create or maintain. It is what remains when we stop grasping at experience. In daily life, this truth reveals itself in the simplest ways. When you eat, eat with your whole being. Feel the texture, the taste, the nourishment. Do not rush through it as a means to an end. When you walk, feel the contact of your feet with the ground, the gentle rise and fall of your steps. When you speak, notice the words forming and dissolving, the pauses between them. And when you listen, truly listen, not only to the words, but to the space in which they arise. To live in awareness is not to perform mindfulness as a task. It is to live without separation, to dissolve the invisible line that divides you from the life you are living. This is what the teacher meant when he told his student, "Do not try to be mindful all the time, just be fully present now." It is not about continuity across time, It is about completeness in this moment. In the West, people often speak of being present as though it were a skill to master. But presence is not an achievement. It is your nature. What needs cultivation is not awareness itself, but the understanding that allows you to rest in it. We spend so much energy trying to reach awareness that we forget we are never outside it. The bird's song, the hum of the refrigerator, the ache in your chest, all of it is already occurring within awareness. You do not have to bring it closer. You only have to notice that it has never been apart. When we live this way, even the most ordinary moments take on a quiet radiance. Washing dishes becomes a meditation on movement, sound, and reflection. Sitting in traffic becomes a lesson in patience and surrender. Waiting in line becomes an invitation to breathe. Awareness transforms everything it touches, not by changing the outer world, but by changing how we meet it. The Buddha often said that enlightenment is not the end of daily life, but the full awakening within it. He compared the awakened mind to a lotus blooming in muddy water, unstained, yet fully rooted in the world. To live in awareness is to bloom in the midst of imperfection. We no longer reject the mud of experience. We recognize that the mud and the lotus are one. There will still be emotions, joy, sorrow, anger, love, but you will no longer drown in them. You will see them as waves rising and falling within the ocean of awareness. They are not enemies to fight or problems to solve. They are expressions of life itself. The key is not to control them, but to observe them with tenderness. When anger arises, notice how it feels in your body, the heat, the contraction, and breathe into it. When sadness comes, allow its space to move, without judgment or story. The moment you bring awareness to emotion, it begins to lose its power to define you. This is what coming home means, returning from the wandering mind that chases stories and fears into the quiet simplicity of being. In that simplicity, peace is not something you create. It is what naturally appears when the struggle ends. The teacher in the story said, "When you stop trying to hold awareness, awareness holds you." This is not a poetic metaphor. It is a description of reality. The more you try to grasp peace, the more it slips away. When you release the grasping, peace reveals itself as the space that has always surrounded you. In modern life, we are taught to measure progress, even in spiritual practice. We ask, am I doing it right? Am I improving? Am I more mindful today than yesterday? But awareness cannot be measured. It has no progress and no decline. The more you look for signs of awakening, the more distant it feels, because the very act of measuring belongs to the mind, not awareness. Awareness has no past or future. It is eternally present, untouched by the timeline of self-improvement. This insight can be both humbling and freeing. You begin to realize that you don't need to become someone else to find peace. You only need to stop running from what is already here. The sense of me, who is trying to awaken, is itself part of the illusion that keeps us from seeing clearly. When the mind relaxes its need to control, awareness shines by itself, as effortlessly as sunlight filling a room when the curtains are drawn. In daily life, this understanding leads to a natural gentleness. You stop forcing your mind to be quiet or your heart to be calm. Instead, you invite awareness into whatever is happening, whether you are joyful or restless, clear or confused. Even confusion can be known with awareness, and the moment it is seen clearly, it loses its heaviness. Imagine holding a snow globe. When it's shaken, the flakes swirl in chaos. But if you simply let it rest, the snow settles and the water becomes clear. You don't have to force stillness, you only need to stop shaking the mind. In that stillness, you begin to see things as they are, transient, delicate, and beautiful. This understanding also deepens our compassion for others. When you recognize awareness as the ground of all experience, you see that the same awareness shines in everyone, behind their fears, their mistakes, their longing. The boundaries between self and other soften. You start to listen more deeply, speak more gently, and forgive more easily. Compassion becomes natural, not as a rule to follow, but as a reflection of unity. Coming home to the source is not about withdrawing from life, but living it from the heart of awareness. You still act, speak, and think, but without the weight of identification. Life continues, the body grows older, relationships shift, plans succeed or fail, yet something in you remains untouched. That something is not a distant, mystical self. It is this very awareness, right here, now. Sometimes, in meditation, people glimpse this stillness and think, this is it. But then they try to hold on to it, and it vanishes. The truth cannot be held because it was never separate from you to begin with. When you stop clinging to the experience, you realize that awareness never left. It is not a state that comes and goes, it is what notices all states. So, how do we live this truth, moment to moment? Not by adding more effort, but by relaxing effort. Not by thinking less, but by believing thoughts less. When thoughts arise, see them as clouds, drifting through the open sky of mind. Let them come and go without trying to change them. The awareness that sees them is already free. In this way, ordinary life becomes the field of awakening. You no longer wait for perfect conditions to practice. Every breath is enough. Eating breakfast is practice. Laughing with a friend is practice. Watching the sunset is practice. Each moment becomes an opportunity to return to the source, to remember that you are not the waves of thought and emotion, but the ocean that holds them. When you live like this, something remarkable happens. The anxiety of keeping awareness disappears. You stop dividing life into sacred and ordinary, spiritual and mundane. Everything becomes sacred, because everything arises from the same stillness. You begin to see the divine not in temples or words, but in the simple act of being alive. The Buddha once said, "Within this fathom-long body and mind lies the path to liberation." That means you don't need to look outside. Awareness is not hidden. It is your very nature. The challenge is not to find it, but to stop overlooking it. So, take a quiet breath. Let this very moment be enough. Feel the aliveness that is already here, the gentle hum of existence, the stillness beneath movement, the awareness that needs no name. That is what it means to return to the source. It is not a destination. It is the recognition that you never truly left. And in that recognition, you awaken, not to something new, but to the timeless presence that has been waiting patiently, right where you are. You are listening to a gentle teaching from the Moonlight Temple series, wisdom drawn from ancient Buddhist roots, brought to life with care and presence. To fully receive the heart of these teachings, I invite you now to pause. Soften the edges of your day. Let your body rest. Take in a slow, quiet breath and exhale into stillness. Allow your awareness to return, not to the past, not to the future, but to this very moment. Nothing else is required, just your presence. If this offering has brought you a moment of peace, we gently invite you to support this journey by subscribing to the Moonlight Temple, sharing these teachings, or simply returning again when your heart needs rest. Every small act of presence helps this temple of silence grow. Chapter 6. Suffering as the gateway to awakening. One afternoon, a weary traveler arrived at a quiet monastery nestled in the mountains. His face carried the marks of many struggles, the loss of loved ones, the weight of failure, the ache of unanswered questions. He approached the old teacher who was sweeping leaves in the courtyard. With a trembling voice, the traveler asked, "Master, I've suffered so much. Please tell me, how can I end this pain? How can I destroy suffering once and for all?" The teacher stopped sweeping. For a long moment, he simply looked at the traveler. Then he placed the broom aside and said gently, "Tell me, what is this suffering you wish to destroy?" The traveler frowned. "It's everything that hurts. Grief, loss, disappointment, fear, loneliness. It's this heavy feeling that life keeps breaking me." The teacher nodded slowly. "And where do you feel this pain right now?" The traveler hesitated, surprised by the question. "Here," he said, placing a hand on his chest. "It's tight. It burns." The teacher looked at him with kindness. "Then stay there. Don't run away from it. Don't try to fix it. Just stay with what is. Look closely into the pain, as if it were your teacher." The traveler blinked in confusion. "Stay with it? But I came here to get rid of it." The teacher smiled, a knowing glimmer in his eyes. "That is why it keeps returning. You've spent your life running from suffering, but running from it only ties you closer to it. When you try to fight it, you give it life. When you stop running and truly see it, it loses its power. Do not seek to destroy suffering. Seek to understand it. The one who sees clearly is already free." The traveler lowered his eyes. But how can pain lead to freedom? How can something so heavy open the door to peace? The teacher pointed toward the horizon where the sun was setting behind the hills. "Look there," he said. "The sky burns with fire before the light disappears. That burning is not destruction, it's transformation. In the same way, suffering is not a punishment, it's a process of revealing. It strips away illusion and pride. It shows us what is true and what is false. When you see pain clearly, not as an enemy, but as a teacher, you begin to wake up." The traveler sat silently. The words did not feel like answers. They felt like a mirror. He realized how deeply he had resisted pain, how much energy he had spent trying to cover it with distractions, achievements, and plans. Yet here, the old teacher was inviting him to stop, to face it directly, to breathe with it. The teacher continued, his voice low and gentle. "The Buddha did not teach us to escape suffering. He taught us to understand it. Whoever sees suffering," he said, "sees also its cause, its ending, and the path that leads to its ending. The moment you see suffering as it is, without judgment or resistance, you have already stepped beyond it." The traveler listened, the evening wind brushing against his skin. He felt the tightness in his chest begin to soften. For the first time, he was not trying to make it go away. He was simply letting it be, breathing into it, feeling its shape, its warmth, its pulse. After a long silence, he whispered, "It feels strange. The pain is still there, but it doesn't hurt in the same way. It's as if it's no longer against me." The teacher smiled. "That is the beginning of freedom. You have stopped making an enemy of life." He lifted the broom again, sweeping the leaves into small circles. "Do you see these leaves?" he asked. "They fall every season, decay, and return to the earth. Yet from that decay, new life arises. If the tree feared the falling of its leaves, it would never rest, never renew. So it is with you. Suffering is the falling of the old, illusions, attachments, identities. When you cling to what must pass, you suffer. When you let it fall, you make space for truth. The traveler watched the leaves swirl in the wind. Something inside him stirred, a sense of recognition, like remembering something forgotten. He spoke softly. All my life, I thought peace meant never feeling pain again. But now I see, maybe peace means not running from it. The teacher nodded. Yes, peace is not the absence of suffering, but the understanding of it. When you understand, the same pain that once seemed unbearable becomes the doorway to compassion. You begin to see that everyone you meet is carrying their own invisible wounds. And instead of judging, you start to love. As darkness began to fall, the two sat quietly. The sound of crickets rose in the distance. The air was cool and still. The traveler's heart, once stormy, now felt strangely calm. He turned to the teacher and asked, "So the way to end suffering is not to escape it, but to see it?" "To see it," the teacher replied, with the eyes of truth. Not through the lens of fear or anger, but with calm attention. Pain demands your presence. It asks you to stop searching elsewhere and return to this moment. If you truly stay with it, not as a victim, not as an analyst, but as a witness, it will unfold its message. Every wound is trying to show you something you have forgotten about yourself. Every heartbreak is an invitation to open wider. The light you seek is hidden inside the shadow you reject. The traveler closed his eyes. His tears fell silently, but they were no longer tears of despair, they were tears of release. He had been fighting life for so long, believing that happiness could only come once all pain was gone. But now he understood what the teacher meant, that pain, seen deeply, becomes understanding. Understanding, embraced fully, becomes compassion, and compassion, lived freely, becomes peace. The teacher said softly, "Sometimes the path to awakening begins with a single honest tear. When the heart breaks open, light enters through the cracks. Don't be afraid of the breaking. Every crack is a doorway." The traveler bowed his head. The courtyard was quiet, except for the rhythmic sound of the broom. He felt no sudden enlightenment, no dramatic change, only a gentle clarity, a knowing that he no longer needed to flee. The journey toward peace was not ahead of him. It had already begun the moment he turned toward his pain. The teacher spoke again, almost in a whisper. "Remember this. When you suffer, don't ask, 'Why me?' Ask, 'What is this suffering showing me?' If you can look into it with curiosity instead of fear, compassion instead of resistance, the darkness will reveal the light that was hidden within it. Then you will see that suffering was never your enemy. It was your guide, leading you home." As the moon rose over the mountains, the traveler stood up, bowed deeply, and thanked the teacher. The pain in his chest was still there, but it had changed its meaning. It no longer felt like punishment. It felt like a doorway, quiet, luminous, and strangely sacred. He walked away slowly, under the soft silver light, each step lighter than the one before. Behind him, the teacher's voice floated through the still night. "Do not fear the fire of suffering. It does not burn you. It refines you. When you stop fighting what is, you begin to see what has always been. And that seeing, that gentle, fearless seeing, is the beginning of awakening." The Buddha once said, "Whoever sees suffering also sees its cause, its end, and the path that leads to its end." This simple, yet profound statement reveals the essence of his teaching. Suffering is not a mistake. It is the first noble truth, not to condemn life, but to open the doorway to understanding. When we turn toward our pain instead of fleeing from it, we begin to see what it truly is. Not punishment, not fate, but the great teacher of impermanence and compassion. Most of us, however, spend our lives running from suffering. We rush to fix it, numb it, distract ourselves, or bury it beneath layers of busyness and achievement. We tell ourselves that if we can just get everything right, the right job, the right partner, the right peace, the pain will disappear. But the Buddha taught that the attempt to escape suffering only strengthens its grip. Why? Because what we resist, we energize. The more we push pain away, the more it defines us. The way of awakening is not to escape, but to see clearly. To see suffering as it is, without the story of my suffering attached to it. The pain that arises, physical, emotional, mental, is simply a movement of life. It does not belong to a self. It is a process of cause and effect, a pattern of clinging and letting go. When we meet it with full awareness, without identification, we discover a strange thing. Suffering begins to dissolve, not because it is solved, but because it is fully understood. This is the insight of the Four Noble Truths. The first truth, dukkha, or suffering, asks us not to judge, but to observe, to acknowledge that life, as long as it is ruled by attachment and aversion, carries an inherent dissatisfaction. The second truth, samudaya, the cause of suffering, shows us that the source is craving, the endless wanting for things to be different. The third truth, nirodha, the cessation of suffering, points not to a future escape, but to a present realization. When craving ceases, peace appears. And the fourth truth, magga, the path, offers the way of right view, right intention, right mindfulness, and right understanding, not as commandments, but as natural expressions of awakening. Yet none of these truths are separate. They are all contained within the first, within suffering itself. To see suffering clearly is to see its cause. To see its cause is to glimpse its ending. And to glimpse its ending is already to be walking the path. That is why the teacher in the story told his student, "When you truly see suffering, you are already beyond it." What does it mean to see suffering? It does not mean analyzing it intellectually or suppressing it stoically. It means feeling it fully, with tenderness, curiosity, and awareness. When pain arises, instead of reacting, we pause. We breathe. We turn inward, not to indulge the pain, but to understand it. We might ask, what is this suffering made of? Where does it live in my body? What thoughts feed it? What story does it tell? The very act of observing begins to change its nature. Suffering thrives in the shadows of resistance. When brought into the light of awareness, it begins to lose form. It is like ice melting under the sun, not destroyed, but transformed into clarity. This is what the Buddha meant when he said that the path to the end of suffering lies within suffering itself. Consider a simple example, the pain of loss. When someone we love is gone, grief arises. Sharp, heavy, sometimes unbearable. The instinct is to turn away, to distract ourselves, to keep busy. But if we pause and feel the grief directly, the ache in the chest, the emptiness, the longing, we begin to see that underneath the pain lies love. Grief is love that has nowhere to go. When we see this truth clearly, The pain begins to open rather than close us. It softens the heart. It reveals our shared humanity. Everyone, everywhere, has felt loss. In understanding our own suffering, we awaken compassion for the suffering of all beings. The Buddha did not promise a world without pain. He promised freedom within pain. To be free does not mean to avoid the storms, but to stand in the middle of them without being swept away. This freedom comes from understanding, not control. It is born the moment we stop asking, "How do I make this end?" and begin asking, "What is this teaching me?" To sit with suffering is an act of profound courage. It requires us to stop seeking comfort and face reality as it is. But in doing so, something miraculous happens. The very thing we feared becomes the key to our liberation. When we stop dividing life into good and bad, pleasant and painful, we begin to see that everything is part of one whole. The pain that once seemed unbearable becomes a teacher of patience, humility, and presence. This teaching is not theoretical. It can be lived in the smallest of moments. Imagine you are stuck in traffic, feeling irritated and anxious. The mind wants to escape, to get home faster, to be somewhere else. But if you pause, breathe, and notice the sensations of frustration, the tension in your chest, the restlessness in your mind, and observe them without judgment, you are already practicing. The irritation loses its power because it has been seen. Awareness has stepped in, and in that seeing, suffering begins to soften. The Buddha called this right understanding, the direct realization that suffering is not the enemy. It is the messenger, the mirror, the call to wakefulness. Without it, we would never look deeply. Without it, we would never question the illusion of control. Without it, we would never discover compassion. Sometimes, people misunderstand the teaching of non-resistance as passivity, but to meet suffering with awareness is not to be indifferent. It is to be deeply intimate with life. When we stop fighting what is, our hearts open. This openness is not weakness, it is wisdom. It allows us to respond to life with clarity instead of reactivity. We act, but not out of fear or anger. We speak, but not to defend or attack. Our actions arise from understanding, not avoidance. In this way, suffering becomes the crucible of transformation. Every moment of pain, when embraced, refines the heart. The ego, which depends on control, begins to loosen its grip. The sense of me and mine fades, and in its place arises a quiet spaciousness, the awareness that everything changes, and yet nothing real is lost. What dies is not love or peace, but illusion. When you truly see this, even the hardest moments begin to shine with meaning. The tears you shed are no longer wasted. They become water for the seeds of compassion. The cracks in your heart are no longer flaws. They are openings through which light can enter. This is why the Buddha called suffering the noble truth. It is noble because it ennobles us. It humbles the mind and purifies the heart. It teaches us the wisdom of letting go, not through avoidance, but through seeing. To see suffering clearly is to awaken from the dream of separation. It is to realize that life is not something happening to you. It is happening as you. In this seeing, you are no longer a victim of pain. You become its student. And the student, when truly attentive, becomes free. When you sit quietly with your own suffering, you are not alone. You are joining the ancient lineage of all beings who have looked into their pain and found wisdom there. The Buddha did not awaken apart from the world. He awakened through seeing the world as it is, in all its beauty and sorrow. So, When suffering arises, as it always will, remember this teaching. Do not turn away. Do not rush to heal or fix. Simply sit, breathe, and listen. The pain will speak if you let it. It will tell you what is clung to, what is feared, what is ready to be released. And when you listen deeply, you may discover that suffering is not against you at all. It is the voice of life calling you home, whispering, with infinite patience. Here too, you can wake up. Suffering is often misunderstood as something to avoid, something to conquer or erase. Yet, in the light of the Buddha's teaching, suffering is not a curse, it is an invitation. It calls us to stop, to look deeply, and to rediscover the path of understanding that lies quietly beneath our pain. Every human being, no matter who they are or where they come from, will meet suffering in some form. This universality makes it not a punishment, but a shared doorway, the very threshold of awakening. When we are hurt, our instinct is to fix the wound immediately. We reach for distractions, for comfort, for control. We tell ourselves that happiness will return once the pain is gone. But the path of mindfulness leads us in a different direction. It asks us to sit with what hurts, to listen to the silent voice within the suffering itself. Pain, when met with awareness, begins to speak. It tells us where we are holding on, where we are afraid, where we have been living out of harmony with truth. Imagine sitting with your sadness as you would with an old friend. You don't rush to comfort them or to change them. You simply sit beside them, breathing together. Over time, that silent companionship reveals more than any words could. You start to see that sadness was never your enemy. It was your longing for wholeness, asking to be seen. The Buddha taught that the way to end suffering is through direct understanding, not through denial. Whoever sees suffering, he said, sees also its cause, its end, and the path that leads to its end. This means that the end of suffering is not hidden in a distant heaven or a future lifetime. It is here, in the midst of your most human experiences. When you look deeply into sorrow, it transforms into wisdom. When you face fear with gentle awareness, it becomes courage. When you embrace loss fully, it opens into love. In daily life, we have countless opportunities to practice this truth. Suppose someone criticizes you unfairly. The first reaction might be to defend yourself, to argue, or to withdraw in shame. But what happens if, instead, you pause, you breathe, you let the sting of those words be felt fully, not suppressed, not exaggerated, just felt? You might notice how the body tightens, how the heart contracts. You might notice thoughts rushing in, stories forming. I'm not good enough. They don't understand me. But if you stay present, gently observing, a space begins to open. You realize that the suffering is not the words themselves, it's your attachment to being seen in a certain way. When you see this clearly, the pain softens. The situation doesn't need to change. Your understanding has changed. This simple shift from resistance to awareness is what turns pain into insight. It's not something mystical, it's deeply human. It is how suffering matures into wisdom. The mind that once fought against what is, now learns to rest within it. The same fire that once burned you, now becomes the light that guides you. The Buddha compared this transformation to a lotus rising from the mud. Without the mud, there is no lotus. Without difficulty, there is no awakening. Yet, the lotus does not resent the mud. It uses it. It draws from it the nutrients it needs to bloom. In the same way, every challenge, every heartbreak, Every fear you face can nourish your growth if you meet it with understanding. When we live this way, life ceases to be divided into good and bad, pleasant and painful. Everything becomes part of the path. The morning breeze, the argument with a friend, the quiet loneliness before sleep, all are teachers. Even the moments that break you open are not mistakes. They are moments of grace, disguised as loss. To live with this understanding does not mean to deny emotion or suppress feeling. It means to feel deeply, but not drown, to allow every wave to rise and fall within the ocean of awareness. The ocean never rejects the waves, it holds them. Similarly, the awakened heart does not reject pain, it holds it tenderly, knowing that it too will pass. Let's bring this into something practical. When you are hurt, perhaps by betrayal, disappointment, or grief, try to sit quietly for a few minutes. Close your eyes. Feel where the pain lives in your body. Maybe it's in the chest, the stomach, or the throat. Don't try to analyze it, just notice it. Breathe into that place gently. Whisper inwardly, "I see you." If tears come, let them. They are not signs of weakness, they are signs of release. When you give pain space to breathe, it begins to soften. Often, you will notice that beneath the surface of sorrow lies tenderness, the simple wish to love and to be loved. Beneath anger lies fear, beneath fear lies the desire to be safe, and beneath all of these is awareness, vast, steady, and compassionate. That awareness was never harmed. It has been present through every joy and every loss, patiently waiting for you to return. The Buddha's teaching does not deny suffering. It transforms it by understanding. When you see that all emotions, even painful ones, are impermanent, arising, changing, dissolving, you stop identifying with them. You begin to say, "There is pain," instead of, "I am in pain." That small change in language reflects a great change in perception. You realize that pain comes and goes, but awareness remains. And in that recognition, freedom begins. Everyday suffering can become your meditation teacher. When you spill your coffee, when plans fall apart, when someone disappoints you, these are not interruptions to your peace. They are invitations to deepen it. They remind you to pause, to return to presence, to respond rather than react. Each time you choose awareness over resistance, you strengthen the habit of freedom. Compassion naturally arises from this practice. When you understand your own suffering deeply, you can no longer judge others harshly. You recognize the shared vulnerability of all beings. You see that anger in another is often pain in disguise, that cruelty is born from ignorance, that beneath every defense lies a wounded heart. This understanding turns reaction into empathy. Instead of asking, "How could they do this?" you begin to ask, "What pain must they be carrying?" In this way, suffering becomes the soil of compassion. The very experiences that once made you bitter now make you kind. The same wounds that once closed your heart now open it. You realize that your suffering is not separate from the suffering of the world. To heal yourself is to heal others. To understand your pain is to understand humanity. When you live like this, even the hardest days become sacred. You stop chasing an imaginary life without suffering and begin to live fully within the one you have. You trust that every difficulty carries meaning, even if you can't see it yet. You stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and start asking, "What is life trying to show me through this?" And gradually, you notice something subtle but profound. Peace is no longer dependent on circumstances. It arises naturally, like stillness beneath the waves. The storms of life may continue, but the heart remains anchored in awareness. This is what it means to walk the path of awakening, not to avoid pain, but to walk through it with understanding. The Buddha's enlightenment did not come from escaping the world, but from seeing it completely. In the same way, our awakening begins not when life becomes easy, but when we meet difficulty with clarity and love. So, when pain comes, as it inevitably will, remember that you are standing at a doorway. You can run from it, or you can step through it. The first leads to repetition, the second leads to freedom. Sit with your pain, listen to it. Let it teach you what you have not yet understood. Let it remind you of your shared humanity. Let it soften your heart. And one day, perhaps without realizing when it happened, you will see that the very suffering you once cursed has become your greatest ally, the teacher that led you home to yourself. That is the quiet miracle of this path. Suffering, when embraced with awareness, becomes not the end of peace, but the beginning of wisdom. You are listening to a gentle teaching from the Moonlight Temple series, wisdom drawn from ancient Buddhist roots, brought to life with care and presence. To fully receive the heart of these teachings, I invite you now to pause, soften the edges of your day, let your body rest, take in a slow, quiet breath, and exhale into stillness. Allow your awareness to return, not to the past, not to the future, but to this very moment. Nothing else is required, just your presence. If this offering has brought you a moment of peace, we gently invite you to support this journey by subscribing to the Moonlight Temple, sharing these teachings, or simply returning again when your heart needs rest. Every small act of presence helps this temple of silence grow. Chapter 7. The True Meaning of Life. To stop is nirvana. One evening, as the sun was setting behind the hills, a wanderer approached, the Buddha. His clothes were dusty, his face weary, and his heart restless. "Master," he asked, "I have been searching for years, through mountains, deserts, and monasteries, trying to find nirvana. Where is it? Please, show me the way." The Buddha looked at him gently and replied, "Right where you stop, there is nirvana." The man blinked, confused. "But I can't stop," he said. "There is always more to learn, more to seek, more to overcome." The Buddha smiled softly. "Then your journey will never end. Nirvana is not found through running, but through stillness. You search as though you have lost something, but you have never left it. Stop running, and you will see you were never apart." The man stood silently. The world around him, the wind, the trees, the distant sound of water, suddenly felt alive in a way it never had before. For the first time, he wasn't trying to get somewhere, he was simply here. That is the essence of the Buddha's teaching. Life's deepest truth is not hidden in a distant heaven or buried in the future. It is right here, within this breath, this moment. When the mind stops chasing and the heart stops grasping, reality reveals itself, unbroken, peaceful, and whole. The true meaning of life is not about achieving something grand. It's about seeing what has always been. The modern world teaches us to become successful, admired, enlightened, perfect. But all this becoming blinds us to the truth that nothing is missing. You don't need to become the light. You already are. To stop, in the Buddhist sense, doesn't mean to withdraw from living. It means to rest in the stillness beneath movement, to live without chasing. It means walking, eating, breathing, working, and loving without the restless need to reach somewhere else. When you stop the inner running, life stops being a race and becomes a homecoming. This is the wisdom of returning to the source. When you stop searching outside, you rediscover what has been quietly present all along: awareness itself. This awareness doesn't age or vanish. It witnesses joy and sorrow alike, yet is untouched by either. It is not a thing to gain, but a truth to recognize. The Buddha once said, "There is an unborn, unconditioned, and undying, and because there is such a reality, liberation is possible." This unborn truth is your very nature. It is the space in which everything arises and passes: thoughts, emotions, sensations, memories. When you see that you are not the contents of awareness but the awareness itself, suffering loses its root. In our daily lives, this truth becomes a quiet revolution. We are so used to striving to reach the next goal, the next success, the next version of happiness. We say, "When I have this, then I will be at peace." But the Buddha's teaching turns this completely around. Peace is not at the end of becoming. Peace begins when becoming ends. Every moment you stop chasing, you come closer to the heart of life. You start to notice simple miracles: the warmth of sunlight on your skin, the rhythm of breathing, the softness of a smile. Each moment becomes complete in itself. You no longer live for someday, you live for this. To live this way is to live with gratitude. Gratitude is the fragrance of awareness. It blooms naturally when you see that everything, even the smallest detail, is an expression of the infinite. The breath you take, the step you walk, the sound of rain, all of it is sacred. When you live with such awareness, life stops being something to conquer and becomes something to cherish. People often ask, "What is the meaning of life?" The answer is not a sentence but a silence. Life itself is the meaning. The question disappears when you stop standing apart from it. When you stop trying to define life, you begin to experience it directly. That is what the Buddha meant when he said, "When you stop, there is nirvana." Stopping does not mean the end of effort or purpose. It means the end of delusion, the end of thinking that happiness lies somewhere else. When you stop, the restless mind quiets, and you see things as they truly are. You see that joy and sorrow, birth and death, gain and loss are not opposites but movements within the same whole. To stop is to awaken to the reality that you are already home. You do not need to go anywhere to find peace. Peace has always been with you, like the sky that remains open no matter how many clouds pass. The mind's storms come and go, but awareness, your true nature, never changes. In modern life, where everything moves fast, this teaching is both radical and liberating. The world urges us to keep moving, keep achieving, keep improving. But the heart of wisdom whispers the opposite. Pause. Take one breath consciously. Feel the life pulsing in your hands, your chest, your feet. In that moment of stillness, you have already touched nirvana. Try this simple reflection. When you wake up in the morning, before reaching for your phone, stop. Feel the warmth of the bed, the air entering your lungs, the quiet hum of existence. Whisper inwardly, "I am alive," and that is enough. Notice how peace appears without you having to do anything. Or when you are walking, stop rushing. Feel your feet connect with the earth. Notice the subtle shift of balance with each step. The mind might say, "I need to get there," but awareness whispers, "You are already there." When you live with such presence, life itself becomes meditation. Every act, washing dishes, drinking tea, talking with a friend, becomes sacred because you are truly here for it. The meaning of life is no longer something to discover. It is something to live. The Buddha did not give abstract philosophies about the afterlife. He gave a path to see the sacred within this very moment. To stop running is to awaken from the dream of elsewhere. It is to realize that heaven and earth, the sacred and the ordinary, are not separate. Every instant is complete, whole, alive. In the end, enlightenment is not the gaining of something new, but the losing of the illusion that you were ever apart. The traveler in the story thought he was far from nirvana, but the moment he stopped, truly stopped, he saw that he had never left. That is the quiet mystery of awakening. You arrive where you have always been. So let this be the final reflection of this journey. You don't need to strive to make life meaningful. Life is meaningful because it is. Every breath, every heartbeat, every laugh and tear, they are all notes in the great song of existence. Stop for a moment. Breathe. Feel. Right now, this is it. This is the miracle. When the running mind pauses, when you no longer need to reach, when you see that nothing is missing, that stillness, that awareness, that simple presence, that is nirvana. And in that realization, you understand the Buddha's gentle smile, for he knew that none of us ever truly left home. We were always here, resting in the heart of life itself. Conclusion: life is not a race toward a distant goal. It is a journey of remembering, of seeing through the noise and discovering the quiet, luminous truth that has always been within you. The true purpose of existence is not to become more, but to return to awareness, to gratitude, to the simple miracle of being. All meaning begins the moment you stop running. When you pause, breathe, and rest fully in the present, the heart opens. Gratitude flows naturally. Life no longer needs to be fixed or perfected. It simply needs to be lived, seen, and loved as it is, as the Buddha taught. When you stop seeking the great reveals itself within you. Every breath, every act of kindness, every quiet moment of awareness is already a doorway to the infinite. So as this reflection comes to a close, may you carry this stillness into your days. Wherever you go, whatever you face, remember, peace is not found elsewhere. It lives in the depth of your own awareness, waiting for you to stop and notice. If this journey has brought you calm and clarity, please support Moonlight Temple by subscribing, sharing, or simply returning whenever your heart seeks rest. May you walk gently, may you see clearly, may you live each moment as a blessing, already whole, already home.